She
isn't
got the
closed
call
till
out.
6, yeah.
Yeah,
She
that's
could
fine.
drive over here. Sometimes she brings Andrew.
That gives us a chance to do other stuff, and then she can come for us.
And the others, you know, they were coming last time.
Okay, so I'll start, we'll go around this way. Jordan Tate.
All right, Kate.
Anna LaRose.
Donna Flood?
Ben Lowe. Tony Bollier.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. First thing on the agenda is to review and approve January minutes. Did I spell everybody's name right? They're a little bit more scant this time. I did include all of the action-based voting, and then I tried to give a description of everything, but if you feel there needs to be some more on there.
We also had Bill Sylvester as a guest for the mayor's ad hoc. And Kathy and Joe was here.
Thank you. Other than that, do we feel good to approve?
First of all,
Second.
All in favor? Okay, moving on, public comment, guest visitors. We don't have any right now. We might in a little bit, should be, so we'll postpone that one. Work in progress, the Bates study.
it's, right.
And that's gonna be like a student, is that gonna be an entire class, or is that like a small group of students capstone project?
It's a team of three.
Okay.
And essentially, they were thinking of coming tonight, but basically, this is break week, so that,
Right.
so they'll be here probably next month.
Okay.
And is there, they will be making would like to make a public presentation, I assume similar to the Barker Mill presentation.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And is there any, probably April, preferably ahead of finals. Finals are the week of our regularly scheduled meeting. Is there any flexibility in there?
Yeah, I'm sure we could adjust our meeting schedule. It's far enough in advance, I think we could.
I'm open, you know, as long as we know ahead of time.
Yeah, like if we can figure it out.
Is it better to have it on a Tuesday or some other date, or?
We'll see what's available for Tuesdays, just to keep it consistent. And if Tuesday doesn't work for most people, then we can try another day. But we'll see if a Tuesday's open and
You have a
make sure that
conflict?
we can get a room. This room.
It's really hard to say.
No more than Tuesday.
He's like, I'm working my butt off trying to get this going.
So yeah, I'd say we'll try and set it, we'll try and figure out the date a month ahead of time. That way it gives us enough time to get a room and everything. Also, along the Bates study, that you said they'll be for, I think in the proposal, they're going to be coordinating with Rosemary, right?
Basically, I think, Chris Carson expects to be here basically to give you a more precise update, but basically a lot of it will be in the form of maps.
Yep.
And
Because I actually reached out to Rosemary to get the zoning shapefile for the city of Auburn, and she was very nice, gave so much information. And she said, you know, I told her I just wanted to look at it for my own personal use, do a little bit of resource ID like I do just in my job. But there's been some maps created by other departments in terms of like parcels and frontage and stuff, and she just wants to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. There's information that they already have created to coordinate with, and then, you know, just being wary about, as someone from the city of Auburn, posting other numbers that haven't gone through them yet. But if it's the base students, then, you know, it wouldn't be coming from an organization within the city of Auburn. So I would say just coordinate with her, since they've already done some work. They've had some different departments coming up with different numbers, so she just wants everything to, you know, be consistent, make sure they're following the same protocols for GIS and all that. But yeah, she's very willing to help. She likes that we reached out. You know, I asked her if we had other conservation stuff that relates to GIS, we could coordinate, and she was very open to that. So that would just be my recommendation.
Does, from a mapping standpoint, in the archives, do the city ones go back as far as SCS or not?
That I don't know. I just was, from her, all I got was existing stuff currently. just needed the zoning, shape file so that I could, like, figure out the amount acres of wetlands in the ag zone, ag resource zone, like acres of deer winter hares, that stuff I was looking at. I wasn't really looking at parcel stuff, so I don't know how far back the GIS stuff goes, so yeah, I'm not too certain how.
Because I know that SCS goes back into the 50s, and I'm not sure it's beyond that or not.
Yeah.
So that, but
Yeah.
between the two,
Sounds like it'd be a good.
Rosemary
opportunity
did a
for that.
really darn good job pulling like every shred of evidence for the city of Auburn and trying to do these overlay maps. She's
Yeah.
got them all coordinated, but please spend time in there and see if there's something missing that you can find, because she'd be more than willing to
Yeah, she's
add more layers.
very
And this is
helpful, very willing.
They
so
do.
important when we're talking about like some of these meetings on where's the soil, where's the ag zone, where's the new development, where's the, you know, and you can literally, it's getting all layered.
Cause I
It's just
layered that
amazing.
stuff, but like not
She's
in relation
really,
to parcels or anything like that. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to figure out basic acreage of these natural resources that, from what I feel, or that I haven't been presented with, haven't looked at yet. So I just wanna know for myself, but I'm not trying to like publish numbers for the conservation commission or anything
Just look
like
and
that.
see if it's in there. And if you find something, let me know.
You know, basically, I think the numbers would help Bates out. Because it's my understanding that basically, you know, they're gonna do overlays of, you know, picking up what the original zones were, and then as changes have been made.
Yeah, I think that's what's unique about the Bates study is that they're looking at how it's evolved. Like you said, in that gap of time that we don't have covered. Whereas, I don't think that's been done yet that I know of.
Right.
So, we'll, if they need me to get in touch with Rosemary and help them get information, I can do that.
And, you know, probably, and I'm not trying to pass the buck, but basically, you know, you're more familiar with what's where. And you mind, if you haven't a chance, check with Jody to see whether she's been in contact, or what contact she's had with Rosemary, so that if we could get that linked up, we can be certain, you know,
Okay.
what's where.
Yeah, I can send them to you.
Come on in.
So that's what we have right now for the faith study update. Any other work in progress that I missed? That big
On
ongoing
that
stuff?
or on the communication group or any
Yeah,
other stuff?
yeah, I don't know what's been going on with other stuff, so if there's other stuff that's been ongoing since last month, feel free to include it here in the work in progress. But I just didn't really see anything immediately in my emails that I wanted to include there, so is there stuff to update on the communications work group?
Well, the communications work group, so we sent that thing out and Maurice reached out to Liz, which incidentally, I had the day off and I was over here. So I stopped in her office, not even realizing that email had gone out to go talk to her. And she's like, yeah, I just sent a reply. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? She's like, well, Maurice sent this thing. And I said, oh. I said, we must be all on the same page. So I actually talked with her in person for about 45 minutes. And it seems like it is gonna be hard to run a Facebook page. I mean, there is a lot to it. So, you know, you gotta manage people when they start badgering. I mean, you gotta be right on top of that. And I'm already managing, I don't know how many.
It's a lot of extra liability.
It is a lot of liability. Liz was very supportive. She said, just think about it, you know, to change your mind, you know, we can always revisit this. She was more than willing. She would love to post anything we have on the Auburn website. Anything with Forest Board, anything with the agricultural, we're doing a lot of food stuff. There's a lot of food insecurity, so we're talking about local farming, things like that. So anytime we have a workshop or any of that stuff, she wants to post it. She doesn't mind because she's already wrapped up in that. The other thing is we're not competing for more people. It's like, okay, so
Right.
you like this page and you're following this page and you're following this page. And you're following
We
this
already
page.
have an immediate audience if we just go through there.
Yeah, because if we start over, we're gonna have to work our way into touching all those people to get them involved. So
So-
it might be better just to stick with the city right now.
And is this a work group, right, the
No,
communications, or is it?
not really. We kind of talked about forming a work group, communications, so.
I almost think that,
So it's more informal.
I would kind of table it, like, let's keep talking about it a little bit.
yeah,
on the
I think
site,
it'd be
but-
better to table it till fall, maybe, and,
Mhm.
So one thing I actually have a new business that I think this would pair really well with is I want to kind of mimic forestry board and that they have a strategic plan.
Mhm.
Theirs is, I think, 5 to 10 years in terms of how far out they're planning. I would like to do maybe a little bit shorter, like a 2-year time frame or something. It's our first one. But I'd like to create a strategic plan for at least 2020, focusing kind of like what we want to, what are the big objectives that we want to tackle, and then maybe creating proactive communication strategies like, you know, every week we send something to Liz that she can post related to conservation. It could be a fact, it could be an event, it could be, you know, just a little snippet of other stuff going on. So I think tabling it is fine, but I'd like to maybe enroll the communications aspect into the strategic plan, just kind of help.
Oh, I think that's a good idea.
We can talk a little bit more about that. I just wasn't, thank you for giving the update, because I kind of loosely followed all of that going on. But it sounds like we want to just work communication through their pages. Very nice.
Now, it looks like it's gonna be a fairly busy spring and summer anyway, and so I almost think that, you know, if we wait close to the fall.
Yep.
I mean,
And I think it's good. I mean, we could still keep thinking about forming a work group, even if our work group doesn't have
Right.
an independent Facebook page or
Oh, I
media
definitely think
site.
that's something where we could do. They could be in charge of developing these communication
Yeah.
strategies for the strategic plan and, you know, any kind of.
And parks too,
drafting.
you know, Tiz has got stuff, you know, it's the same thing with parks and trying to promote that. So I don't mind, I think Tiz has an interest in communications,
Yeah.
to say the least. And I don't mind trying to keep that in the front of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't wanna assume the communications role yet, but I don't mind.
Yeah.
I don't wanna lose sight of this, but I think tabling.
Yeah, I think, you know,
An
I
official
think
work
there are
group
gonna be,
maybe, but-
you know, so many other competing, you know, things this summer, and summer we also have personal interests and that sort of thing.
We got Arbor Days coming
So-
up.
Yeah,
There's a
whatever
lot.
ideas you or anyone else has about communication, and if you want to just brainstorm and like jot notes down on a Word doc, send it to me and I could create a folder for it in the Google Drive. That way we have all of it stored in one place. And when we're ready to look at it a little bit more formally, we can just pull up all that stuff and see, you know, go from there. But yeah, you don't have to wait. If you have ideas, feel free to send them to me and I'll see them in the Google Drive.
But I think, you know, with some of the frustrations that John has run into, I think, you know, we need to put some thought into how best to address it and, you know, meet those challenges.
Definitely.
So moving on to the work completed, there's definitely been a lot going on in terms of subcommittee work. But pretty much from the Conservation Commission standpoint, we sent a second letter of concern to City Council, MAGARP, the Mayor's Office, and then all of the Conservation Commissioners received it as well. I think that was January 22nd, and Josie from the County Soil and Water District, yep, she had sent a letter as well. She did get a response from
Holly.
Councilor Holly, that she was going to at least bring it to the attention of the group at the meeting. I didn't get a response, which is a little disheartening, but again, I don't know, maybe I'm going to junk mail or something. I'm not exactly sure. So hopefully we can work on just.
Neither one of those letters were brought up during the meetings.
It was really nice that Josie was.
And they weren't brought up during the council meetings either. So I'm just saying.
Well, maybe I'll have to go and that one of the meetings. But, well, future meetings if there are any.
Okay.
I don't think it's a lost cause. I do believe that they read it.
I think they did too. I mean, I'm sure they get bombarded with stuff and, you know, I'm not asking to be top priority, but I would just like at least verification that it was received. That's all I want to work on establishing. And I think the more that we present ourselves, the more recognition that we'll get. And I think it's probably just a matter of kind of building a reputation and relationships with other parts of the city government. So hopefully this week we'll just get the oil. Just keep sending letters. So that's what I had for work completed. As far as subcommittee updates go, Tiz is not here to update parks. I think she sent a small little recap. Let me try and said that they were having issues again with their vacancies. Again, Parks doesn't have actual limited positions, but she said they've had issues with they're not getting their post on the city website for recruitment. But it sounds like
I didn't see it up today either.
it sounds like because someone's been out in the IT department, they might be a little bit backlogged. So I can respond to her with that.
I did notice, like, when they have that volunteer meeting, they list all the committees, but I think some of these committees, they come underneath us, and they're not,
So they're not posted directly on the.
right, because I think they have to come through here or something, I'm
Well,
not really
today
sure.
when they posted, it said we had 4 openings on Conservation Commission. And I think what they've done is
Oh.
they've taken the 1 that we have open and the 3 that are coming
Up for
up.
reappointment, because technically we could be not reappointed,
Yeah.
which I really hope doesn't happen. But, so Tiz said, Missy Edgecombe, the chair, has resigned from Parks. Her husband Keith will join the committee but isn't ready to be chair. I'm the only other regular member who attends. I've done nearly 2 years as chair. She doesn't want to be chair again, so they're hoping to get some recruitment. They've updated the list today looking for volunteers, but again, Park wasn't mentioned, she just said. So hopefully, we can just give another reminder, see if they can just post, or maybe even go through Liz on the social media pages if they can't get it up on, Parks, since they're a subcommittee of us, maybe they do have to go through Conservation Commission, but if you do a social media post, maybe that'll help bring a little bit more immediate attention to the vacancies they have there. So I'm going to make a note to myself to contact Liz about
That's a great idea.
a social media post for the vacancies, or just recruitment
For
for Parks.
board too, yeah.
So other subcommittee update, I don't know if I did I keep LA Trails in there? Sorry, I'm not trying to be rude,
Well, LA Trails, yes, because it's still technically kind of a work group, but it's kind of
tabled
right
for a
now,
year.
me and Ben are morphing into like a project with.
Yeah, and there's some other news there too. So there's the Mount Appetite
Yeah,
Trails Work Group. Do you want to talk about that?
well, we can, but we probably should talk about Forest Board
Oh,
first.
yeah.
Or we can back,
Let it be this
just
one.
keep going, just go,
Okay.
we'll backtrack.
Alright. So I connected with Doug Reed, who used to be with the city of Auburn and is now with the city of Lewiston. And he's working on essentially doing the same thing. And as I talked about last month, ALT had kind of backed off. They just have other priorities right now. So that's kind of perfect. And I passed him all the contact info from the work last year, and also informed him about the Mount Appetite Trails
Nice.
group, because I can be a springboard into a bigger Lewiston Auburn Trails,
Yeah,
whatever it becomes. So he's kind of taking the lead on that, and I offered to assist on behalf of the Conservation Commission, if that's okay with everybody. And we'll see where that goes. He's gathering names and hoping to start getting people together in person sometime in March.
awesome.
Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, because whenever LA Trails can, kind of re-engage with their work, it can just morph into that, but no reason to not focus on it now.
That's right. And he's also on the board of the Androscoggin Land Trust.
Oh, okay, so that's a really
That's
good.
So he's really trying to just do LA Trail, to get LA Trails going again. Whether it ends up being under the umbrella of ALT or not.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, that's good,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's great.
Whatever you can do on behalf of the Conservation Commission for that, we really appreciate. It doesn't have to be in any formal capacity, I guess champion, like we call it, work group, but
Yeah.
whatever you can, do for that group, and then just report back, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Sweet, it's always better to have more heads on the team.
Yeah.
And then the Mount Appetite stuff, we're talking about signage. And as you know, I asked for some feedback here for Sport and some other groups, and we're trying to we want to develop, I think it's a good idea to develop a best management practice or a best practice on signage. because everybody wants to put signage up, and we have signage on trails that are going up now, that have already been up, same with Lewiston and Auburn. Should they be the same, should they not? You know, where do we post them? What kind of trees are we gonna post them on, or stumpage, or posts, or what are the recommendations? And every group that I've been through has their own, you shouldn't, or you should, ideas. And we are gonna talk about that, actually next Tuesday is our next meeting, the 26th, about the signage. The signage that I had sent around was from the mountain bikers guys. They did a really fabulous job. And they're going to be on tin plates, but they'll have the ability of putting new stickers up, so they can change that at any time. But once we have the post up, if it's on a tree, it's gonna be on a tree. If it's on the ground, it's on the ground. And there's ups and downs to both.
Right.
The one thing we kept talking about is making sure that they're not on, like, you know, endangered species or trees of valuable, you know, we wanna make sure if we have the
Right.
option and you have 6 trees there, please don't put it on, you know, the only large elm tree in this area.
Right.
Not that they're gonna really harm most trees, most signage when you go to like the Appalachian Trail and stuff, they're nailed in trees.
Right.
You know,
I
posts
think
get
a
kicked
BMP
over,
for
kids are
signage would be
vandalizing
great.
stuff, so there's a lot to think about, but maybe we should have some kind of direction.
Yeah, I think developing a BMP for that would be great. There's many different levels of scope you could go with that in terms of, you know, what existing signage you can review, where you're gonna get your sources from. Do you wanna mimic stuff like, you know, does the state have a template for BMPs, or maybe like NEMBA has, you know, certain
Yeah.
signage BMPs they have. So, you know, I'm really down for whatever kind of research wants to be done for it. I think it's a great idea, and, you know, could definitely play into the trails group that's kind of coming up. So any ideas, I think I'd be supportive of that.
Portland Trails is a really good model there because their trails are lots of different landowners and
Mhm.
multiple uses, but the Portland Trails organization just helps coordinate all of the marketing and signage
Yeah.
and all of that, so all the Portland trails are uniform, even if they belong to the Auburn Society or the city of Portland or whoever.
Do they have a contact or a written document? 'Cause that's the thing, we've gone around and around and we can't really find any management practice. Like, a lot of it is just hearsay. They have a group and they're all on the same page and we're gonna do it this way. But to
There-
find a really written
I
thought
talked to
of
somebody from there last year, I can't remember her name, but there is contact info on their webpage, and that's how I got
Okay.
it up.
Let me try to see if we can find some of that. If you find something in the meantime, let me know. Before next Tuesday's meeting.
Again, I would say, only because I've recently gotten into this with my own job, GIS, there's a lot that goes into making a GIS figure in terms of the color of the outline, the distance,
Mhm.
the size.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I would say, reach out to Rosemary and see what kind of advice she could give you in terms of making graphics at least. Like, she might have a little bit to contribute on that, if like City of Auburn does any standard colors or, you know, standard logos.
Well, there isn't any, that's the thing, there aren't any. We've done all that research.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, yeah, maybe she would know, but if you've already.
So,
looked at that.
you know, NEMBA, they have standard trail systems for the biking piece.
Right.
So depending on the grade of the trail, like how hard it is, you know, whether it's
Gotcha.
easy, moderate, and most of it right now is just blue. It's
Mhm.
kind of in the moderate zone. But this is multi-use trails, so
Yeah.
the other thing is you look at, if it's a hiker, it's gonna be completely different.
Right.
You know, if it's, I don't know, mountains, it's very different.
Mhm.
So there are state type of standards,
Yeah.
and should we adopt those? Yes. But like the signage piece, I think it's not so much, should it be a blue square, because we can figure that out. The state's got all this, how much grade, how much elevation, how many feet, blah, blah, blah. It's, where are we gonna post them?
Gotcha.
So if we're using wood posts, it's fine. Do we wanna nail them to a tree? Do we wanna use specific nails? Do we want them nailed
And if you're gonna
in
make
3
one post,
inches, 6
what's the height,
inches?
how far off the trail?
How big of a tree? If it's a tree of significant, you know, interest, look at maple trees, tapping. I don't know if Kathy taps, but I tap maple trees. You wanna make sure your trees are good 10 to 14 inches. If it's 10 and less, you can kill the tree by tapping the tree. So we wanna make sure that we're just kinda selective on
Okay,
where
yeah.
we're putting them. And I think that that's the biggest takeaway that we're missing is where and how.
Yeah, Portland
Not
Trails.
so
that
much
might be
what the
good,
signage is
or
the placement.
Right.
That's the missing piece.
Okay, well, if you, or do you wanna tackle looking into like, looking at this more, maybe finding other examples or looking into who we
Yeah.
contact and then report back next meeting, or do you
There's
need
one,
assistance? Do you
is
need
it
to do anything?
One of the towns has a little bit of something, but most of what we're looking at is this thick document that New York, the state of New York has like, boom, boom, boom. This color, this grade, nail it to this type of tree, this type
Okay.
of nail, you know, made out of this type of metal, and I don't know if we wanna
Yeah.
parent that or just kinda, but
Yeah, I mean, if you
That's
wanna send
part
it
of it.
around to the group and we can like. look
I
at
think
it.
if Portland Trails is doing something, it would be pretty significant just to kind of adopt, if they have something like
Yeah,
that.
maybe.
Okay, well, thank you for.
Both from the standpoint of the forest board, the trails group, Parks group, I'd like to give you every bit of encouragement I could. But I would suggest you may not want to plan too far down the road until you see until you know what's going to occur as far as the mayor is concerned, because basically, if houses are a factor, that may throw a monkey wrench in some of your plans. So you might want to, make your plans good, keep your enthusiasm up, but, be very watchful as to what may or may not occur if it's residential related, because that could impact a lot of your trails, a lot of your signs, and a lot of your forest work and that sort of thing. So anyway, I don't want to discourage you at all, but on the other hand, realistically, I hate to see it work both ways too.
I think we're just really looking at getting signage up. I mean, all these trails, it's hard. People get lost in these places. They don't want to go to Mount Appetite because they get lost.
Mount Appetite, the red trail and the blue trail intersect so many times.
Yeah, and they're not blazed very well. They gotta be
I have to keep
reblazed.
track, I'm like, okay, I crossed this many times, this way, and then move back. Yeah, it can be very disorienting.
And then, ALT put up some gorgeous signage behind Shore Heights, so we've got that going. So there's another type of signage going, which is wooden. And then the stuff which is gonna be tin. So now that we're getting trails labeled, there's no reason why we can't just put a new sign there. We're at least getting them where they should be and what, it's a work in progress.
Because, there are a lot of private landowners that basically are, welcome hikers and that sort of thing, but, and probably, a lot of them put them on sign. But, at this point, it's a little hard to make long-range plans. I wouldn't encourage it until you do resolve some of these other issues.
Well, that seems like a good segue for our next, well, so does that cover LA?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so then we can segue into the subcommittee update for the ad hoc group.
Or go back to Forest Board real quick.
Back to Forest.
Yeah, well, we didn't really do
Yeah, why
Forest
don't you
Board.
do
we
Forest
skipped it.
Board?
Oh, well, that's what I was just asking, if it covered LACSD.
So, yeah, we didn't have a meeting because snow and all of that stuff, but then we had one that was rescheduled, which was our January meeting. So we've had a meeting before, right? That you missed. But that was the
Yeah.
one we had to reschedule the next week, because when I brought it up, Rick's like, oh shoot, I wasn't prepared, so we ended up meeting the following.
Yeah,
January.
when it was rescheduled, I couldn't make that because I had a network.
So January, we talked about the brown-tailed moth workshop, which we ended up having, and again, we had a snowstorm coming up, so we scheduled that the week after. It was actually really successful, and it was more successful than our last one, to the best management practice for forestry staff. We probably had, 60, almost 70 people in there. Not even kidding, people were standing up.
We should do it again then.
Yes. So there is a lot going on with invasive critters, I'm gonna say, in a whole, because it's not just the caterpillars, we're talking about, certain, like the marmorated stink bugs, an issue right now, and we're talking about anyway, different invasive species. So the state's been doing a lot of stuff all over, and the brown-tailed moth continues to be a very big problem right here in Androscoggin County, which when they brought the maps up and we had the district guys come down, we kept saying, well, this is Lewis and this is Auburn, and you don't even have them in the red, but we can tell you right now, boom, boom, boom. Most of the people in the room were either working for both cities, sitting on forest board, they were landowners, they were in agricultural, and they were like, yeah, man, you gotta update your maps, because this is how quick this is spread. So I think they're planning on doing another like public thing right here in town. But the significance of brown-tailed moth is we really wanna like nip this now, because it's winter. And actually, yeah, why don't you just pass those down so that Kathy, you have one too. You can have one if you care.
Yeah, you can see them right now.
Yeah, so you can see them right now, and it's been kind of interesting. Even at my, my normal day job here, I've been walking around the lot looking at the crowns of trees after having this conversation, because there are places I never even looked for them. And after that whole meeting, I was like, wow, you're talking, it's out on the Goddard Road in Lewiston? So now every time I'm in, I'm like, oh my God, it really is out here.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even realize.
Once you kind of talk about it, you see it everywhere.
So they did, they brought in like all the different stages too, to show people what the difference is and how to clip them. But the problem is brown tails like to build their nests up in the canopy. And people, even when you have pole saws and pole clippers, I mean, even the massive ones that go up 40 or so feet, you still can't get to the crown, so you can't get to some of these trees. So some of these trees have to be taken down. That's the only way you're gonna get there. And then the other thing is, like he says, they were working on all these projects in Brunswick and up by Wolf's Neck State Park and stuff. And they showed examples on how they've been trying to manage it. Sometimes they come in with a bucket loader and a pole, so they can get up even higher. It's really about managing. You're never gonna eradicate. So now I'm looking, here's my public health nurse hat on, and there was a public health nurse there from the state. We got a chance to talk quite a bit, and it's really gotten to the point where we gotta get to public education now.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is like so much more beyond now. We've exhausted nipping it in the butt with conservation and forestry throughout the state, as well as the other moths and other critters. And I think this is really, these guys, I saw over this summer that just passed, probably 47 of my patients came in just covered in this classic rash. And every one of them came in, oh my God, Brianna, I get the worst poison ivy in the whole world. Just look at that, like, that's not poison ivy.
Yeah, I've had it 3 times, and because I worked at Wolf's Neck State Park.
Yeah, it's miserable.
And we had to do just like regular picking up of branches that fall down in windstorms, and yeah, I had a whole body rash 3 times that one summer, and it can also cause respiratory issues too, and a
So,
smaller percentage of people.
I have some properties that I take care of down on the forest side, and they're having Bartlett tree experts come in and do systemic on their trees.
So they
It's
talked about
expensive.
management. The best thing is to clip them. Either burn them if you can. It's actually the best idea is to burn them if you can. If you're in city limits, you can't be having bonfires usually in the middle of your lawn. But yeah, I know. And it depends on how bad it is. If you're clipping a small trash bag worth, you might be able to take that trash bag worth and douse it into some soapy water, which is what they suggest. Just let it soak. Soapy water will get to the nest, because the nest is waterproof. That's why it winters over. The soap will break that water surface and it will drown them. They'll die. But if you're dealing with large amounts or the branches are very large, you can't be shoving all that in a trash bag and then downing it. And then what do you do with the soapy water? You're going to dump that down the drain? You're going to pour that on your lawn? So burning it really is best. If you can't do that, they inject trees too, and they're injecting trees for other critters. So we talk about, emerald ash borers and all these other things, the Asian beetles that are coming up. But injecting the tree can kill the tree. It's using a lot of toxic chemicals. You've got to drill holes through the whole entire tree trunk. It takes time. And you really got to catch them at a whole nother, not in the winter, you've got to catch them when the little caterpillars have crawled up. So each season and each month throughout the year is a different type of treatment to contain these things. In the winter right now, we're looking at clipping them, burning
It's
them.
more containment thing.
Yeah, and they're easy to see because there are leaves on trees that just, I don't know, I call them lazy leaves, they just don't want to fall. They're just up there, and that doesn't mean it's a nest, but if you see the crown of a tree and it's got multiple leaves that are curled, even if they're 60 feet up and you can't see them, but you can see all these curled leaves, that should be really suspicious of brown-tailed moths, because that's what they do. And so it's tough. So right now, that management piece is going on. That injection system is pretty slick. They've treated trees like that. In other cases, they've just cut the whole tree down, which is sad. And it depends on the type of year. But these little spines, even if you squash them on your lawn, these spines are toxic for up to 3 years, even more. And a lot of times people get into these rashes and they have never seen the caterpillar. They have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea at all. So I'm gonna say 90% of the time.
So then this would be a good, we don't have to wait till fall, but
No,
this
I
would be a
think,
good thing to contact Liz about just sending a post
Yeah.
on social media. Keep out, an eye out for these guys in spring, where
Yeah.
they most likely can be found, and what can we do to prevent, or how can you identify a rash, maybe something along those lines would be good. Anything else for LACFP?
we've got, so our meeting is Thursday. Our plan is, again, like Jordan says, is the strategic plan, is a 5-year plan. And we're working on, it's up to 2020. So we're working on looking at our next 5-year plan. And we reviewed at that meeting the basics of what we had in our strategic plan, and we basically accomplished all of it. So we want to continue that. Some of those plans were things like when we run our Arbor Day week and how successful that's been, and trying to do some outreach like with this and with the best management practice and stuff like that. So our little tree nursery, that's doing really well. So I think we're gonna mirror image most of the same strategic plan moving forward. Thursday we'll talk about that. So if anybody's got community tree related questions, concerns, or things they'd like to see the board do, now's the time to kind of bring it up. You can always email me later if something comes to you. And it doesn't have to be by Thursday for this meeting, because it's gonna be an ongoing process. Yeah. It'd be nice to include.
I would hope that basically that some dialogue can emerge. We've got commercial forest, we've got urban forest, we've got suburban. And the suburban component is forgotten. Now, can the forest board contribute? I would hate to see another independent group, because we have too many groups now anyway.
Well,
But-
I know, and it's tough, and because it's a group that works with Lewiston, it's very much tied to what they do
But
too.
with Doug Green's interest in trails and that sort of thing, can't we
I think there's areas-
establish a dialogue with Lewiston to see that they should have a similar interest?
I definitely think that there's room to incorporate suburban forest into LACFP in the sense of, like, I know that Lewiston has that impervious surface issue or whatever, where if you can, like, reduce the amount of impervious surface on your lawn.
Yeah.
They have certain programs for that, in which case, maybe planting a tree would help or something like that. So I think there's room in terms of homeownership and education in that front. I don't know about anything in terms of policies that they would be able to do, but I think at least in outreach and education, there's room to work with residential, homeowners.
But, at least here in Auburn, once you get outside the urban core, most of the original plots of land were rectangular plot that basically included a residence and then maybe a field and then some woodland. And essentially, those lots have continued, and whether residential or what have you, a high percentage of the suburban and residential and rural residential homeowners basically have built from just 1 or 2 to 10 or 20 acres of forest, and essentially they're sort of lost in the middle, and really a tremendous amount of total acres are in those split zone groups or whatever.
I think we definitely need to expand it too, because I'm with you, and I've talked with Bill Sylvester, and I talked with Rick about that. But because it's the community forest, they only focusing really on community forest, so we're looking at like,
Publicly owned.
yeah, publicly owned, and tree canopy and things like that, but there's no reason why I can't keep expanding to that, but I'm almost thinking that whole forestry section, forestry management, again, Bill Sylvester, very knowledgeable about that. I see if we can get that agricultural group going, that there would be a forest component, so that it's looking at the larger picture of all of Auburn. Because the community forest board is so few and far between too, there's only so many. And because half of them really are city workers, we're always focused on, oh yeah, this tree fell down, or we get this stuff here, so we're always gonna get sucked back into community trees.
But you know, this.
Nobody's gonna keep thinking outside the box. I almost think that we need that as part of the agricultural.
You know, for example, the state's tree growth current use law, basically anyone with 10 acres or more can actually participate in that program. So if you just think in terms of that segment, maybe 10, 15 acres, you know, they aren't really a part of any formal management system, but yet collectively they could be.
Yeah.
And actually, they could also be an asset to some of your trails groups and all of those other things. And SCS basically has some funding basically for the small forest owners too. So but just that they're almost being overlooked and not being paid any attention to, but there's a significant number of both people and acreage that I think could contribute in many ways, a lot more than it is right now.
I think it's worth at least bringing up as maybe one of the 5-year goals for the strategic plan is to start
Reach out more.
incorporating. We'll bring it up on Thursday.
Yeah.
And also, you know, if you're visiting with Doug Green, possibly he can visit with some of the Lewiston contributors, and, you know, particularly when Dave Griswold was there was just a tremendous resource of knowledge there that could be utilized.
It's gone.
Yeah, he's gone, but basically, I think you ought to work harder to get him. I got the feeling in reading his resignation letter that basically he was open to contributing at some point to the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, he is. He's had a lot of family stuff going on.
Yeah.
He just needs time to be able to
Right,
do his thing.
so I think,
Yeah.
don't want to forget that. Excuse me, but I really think that suburban component probably needs some interest from both directions.
Thank you. Okay, so now we can move on to
The hot topic.
the ad hoc group.
Kathy, you want to report?
So, I don't know what to say. I don't know if it is going to be presented at this council meeting on Monday night. My total intuitive feeling of this is that this new zoning proposal is going to create nothing but another residential zone. It does essentially nothing for agriculture, forestry, or conservation. No matter how many times we've tried to push for more discussion on those issues, nothing. It's not even acknowledged, really, to be honest with you. And the few points that we have been able to get across have been tabled. So, We're going to try and formulate an alternative plan to present at the same time. We have been in touch with various agencies of the state, expressing our concern. So my understanding now is that it's going to be presented in a workshop form to City Council, and then it's going to go to City Council
That's Monday.
on Monday. As far as we know, we don't know any different right now. If the City Council approves it, then that plan is submitted to the planning board, and I don't know, is this group supposed to weigh in on?
Originally,
It's
yes, but it was interesting because the last two meetings, that was not.
Yeah, they said
the
once
conversation.
it's been voted on by the MAGRP, it's supposed to go to the planning board and Conservation Commission for review
Before
before it's
council.
voted on.
Okay, I have no idea procedurally whether that's gonna happen.
I'll review
And
the language again.
also, because it's a mayor's appointed committee, there doesn't have to be a vote, and there wasn't a vote. It wasn't even consensus. It was, this is what we're looking at, we're gonna go through this, and this is going forward.
So on Monday is the workshop or Monday's the vote? Did it already happen?
2, workshop prior
On the
to
same
City
evening?
Council.
Is that normal for them?
Yes, they
Okay.
always have some sort of workshop. I do believe now, whether it's ever happens before every city council meeting or not, it gives the city councilors an opportunity to talk about what's on the agenda and get them maybe a little clearer in their mind what is actually going to be discussed at the city council level, official.
Okay.
Public can't comment,
And that's this Monday?
correct.
Okay.
Now, as far as we know,
At the workshop.
public can't comment at the workshop, they can comment in open session at the regular city council meeting.
And Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but normally the workshop is from 5:30 to 7,
Yeah.
and then the open council meetings from 7 to 8:30.
Seven to five.
The workshop.
And I think there's usually like a 15-minute break between the workshop and the actual meeting. If I'm not that much.
So we, I'm really discouraged. I'm not discouraged, that's not the right word. I'm disgusted that we were presented with something, really, any discussion that we were supposed to have on it a week ago, it didn't really matter. It wasn't important. It wasn't relevant. Nothing was enacted on it at all, right? We were just, this is it, we're gonna go through it, and then we were done. Didn't ask for any motions, every time I brought up something, Maurice brought up something, somebody else, maybe we'll get to that. We're gonna table that for right now,
Yeah,
but keep moving on.
and then there was no votes.
No votes.
And then I remember in the meeting, he said twice, we already discussed this, we've already voted on that. But when you go back, that was never voted on.
I think
So the
it was-
original thought, the original plan is what's going to the workshop, whatever those numbers were before, is the same, what it was, 10,000,
The 3
3 acres and the,
Yeah, and the
1,000,
1,000.
And 1,000, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I think though, throughout the process, basically through the series of meetings, basically, it was suggested that we discuss a certain topic and hopefully put that aside, then we did the next one, the next one, the next one. And I know several of us, myself included, basically at times just voted to continue, but without supporting the actual content, but assuming, and I felt we've been the understanding that basically once these steps are put together, we have an opportunity to look at and discuss the whole thing to see how it fits together and see whether none of that ever occurred.
The only, if you go back to the very first, because I watched them all again, the only one that was actually voted and agreed by the majority was that first one, the 14660, which was the purpose. That was the only one that was ever finalized, voted, we're good with this, we don't need to change anything else.
And what
Every
we-
other meeting, the other ones kept changing, definitions were changing, yay or nay. Well, we're gonna go back to the 1,000, well, we're gonna have, now you have to have A, B, and C, well, wait a minute, A, B, C, and D, oh, wait, E. Well, we need to make sure this is okay. Boundaries, road frontage, everything kept moving, so nothing was ever, besides that original purpose, voted on against.
And honestly, this whole new
Consensus.
document
Yeah.
has nothing to do with the mission
Yeah.
statement or the original purpose. It really doesn't.
And that mission is, purpose has been read at every single meeting, even Barbara read it once too, even. I think it's important because that purpose is the whole reason why that entire ordinance exists.
It also has
So-
nothing in common with our strategic plan
Yeah.
either. It's completely divergent. So personally, all along, I've felt we've kind of backed into this the wrong way, that we have attacked and created a convoluted document that it just opens up all of this land for potential development.
And, you know, just from an informational standpoint, it doesn't have any great significance, but when the council authorized the mayor to go ahead and do this, basically, it was suggested that they, you know, there'd be 7 people appointed, residents of Auburn, and certain other criteria, and that roughly 2 things might be for the 10-acre and 50% would be the focus. We've ended up with an 8-person committee. One of the key people is a non-resident. But, you know, it's different than the council really authorized or agreed to, but basically the mayor has the prerogative to make those changes. But I think you should be aware that those changes have occurred.
And I hear over and over from everything, from the original studies to the temporary committee that was in existence to the mayor's ad hoc committee, that the one consistency was form this agricultural commission or board, whatever you want to call it, define it, and then move forward. And again, I hear that out of these. And that is the one thing that has been consistent for the last 2 years that I don't see still happening.
No, they want to make the changes to the ordinance without forming a.
First, without forming a committee. And then what, if it's a committee versus a board, what authority will they have? Are they gonna just be an advisor? Are they gonna formulate or type up a formal plan for the board to review to say yay or nay? When exceptions come up and things like
Well,
that.
why don't you fill her in on the status of
Yeah.
Of the agricultural commission or board. So at the end of our meeting, it was agreed that we have another meeting to discuss that.
Yeah.
And we have received no communication from anyone whatsoever. It was supposed
But
to
actually, you assigned that to the 2 councilors
Right.
to have that, to lead that.
Yeah.
And I've emailed Holly twice about it. Asking.
Do they ever do like a pro or con list, like if we do it this way, then this is gonna benefit Auburn by attracting new generation people or whatever? Do they ever look at that? So what's their idea behind this 3 acres? They think it's gonna increase I mean, to me,
So,
it's like,
the idea behind 3 acres is to clean up all of the under compliant zones in the agricultural zone right now. So there are, I'm not sure the exact number, Maurice, 80 some odd
Yeah,
3 acre
80
lots? Or 80
87 or something.
non-compliant lots that stand.
Between 3 and 10.
3 and 10, that are currently on the books right now. So what they're saying is, let's get those cleaned up and people able to farm or have some sort
Build
of
a house on
agriculture.
those.
Right. They don't believe that there will be 80 potential building sites because of soil restrictions, wetlands, whatever. We have never received that number of how many there actually could be.
Well, we've tried to get some soil conditions incorporated so that it would save, conserve some of the prime and
There could be no further building.
soils of statewide importance. that's,
That's
I'm
not
not,
realistic.
I'm not sure that's going to occur.
In the last stats that I saw, there was only less than 3% left in the agricultural zone, which is
Mhm.
75% of the land, only 3% of it left that is prime soil.
Mhm.
So if we put even one house on that prime soil, you've taken that out of agriculture.
When I was looking at GIS, and again, this is my numbers, my personal numbers, not reflective of Conservation Commission, but when I looked at the data, there's about 5,500 acres of prime or statewide significant farmland soils. There's 7,500 acres of wetlands, and there's 1,300 acres of deer wintering areas, and one significant vernal pool, all within the,
Agriculture that you
research
found on the
protection.
map, yeah.
and that's really half an hour.
And that's just what you found on the maps.
Yeah, well, like I said, I had to clip the data. It's all statewide data. I didn't create any data. I just clipped it to what the ag resource protection zone is, and then those are the numbers that I got. And there's also farmland, so there's also farmland of local importance that is regulated in terms of like federal information, federal action. I think it might be regulated at the state level, but I just focus on the prime and statewide farmland soils.
That's a lot of land right there, that. And the thing is, you know, planning board
But I don't know if
doesn't
they know that.
necessarily have that background.
This is what I've
Sometimes
been
I
asking for.
swear
I
they,
want to know if they know what's in the
Yeah.
zone. It's all
Yeah.
I've been asking for, and I've received no.
because the next thing you know,
responses.
you get somebody with a building project and they say, okay, great, so now this passes, and I wanna put my home on my lot that's 4 acres, and I wanna put my house here, and blah, 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 and they come up with this plan, and they have people come in, survey the land, whatever, yeah, okay, so we can do that. The planning board's gonna try to do their best with what information they have at the time, but a lot of times, they might just pass it, not realizing, because there was no data overlaying, this soil, by the way, that you just okayed is prime soil.
You know, I wish we could maybe answer some of your questions by you know, with some projected impact information, but we haven't.
Yeah,
There has been no
yeah,
projections provided at all as far as the impact is concerned. And I think that's an issue that you folks should consider, basically, because basically if 40% of the land in Auburn is going to be affected, we should have some projections as to what the impact might be, because basically in a subdivision or anything else, and that's a much smaller thing, you know, there's a whole series of criteria of, you know, the projected impact, or basically on whether it be on wildlife or on soil and water or on anything. But we haven't had any of those impact projections provided at all. And I would hope that's the gap that they might consider before we're going too far, but it just never been
This group was
discussed.
not formed with that intent, Maurice, now I firmly believe that.
mhm.
I think it was, I
You
do.
do? My goodness.
I know, it's a revelation, isn't it?
Well, it just amazes me that, like, I don't know, like, Auburn seems to be like losing their population, and the people are not coming here, you know what I mean? And people that come here, I have been here like 10 years, probably are not gonna stay here. But it just amazes me that they don't come up with these plans and ideas where, so we're all the same thing. You know what I mean? Make parks better so we can go and take our children to the parks, make them safe so we can do that. You know, and then they're gonna do this stuff with the land, it's gonna change the whole thing, and it's not gonna be a place that people wanna come or stay.
We've you know, trying to stimulate some interest in cluster housing or co-housing and that sort of thing, which basically has been demonstrated time and time again to have an advantage because it reduces the footprint, and yet you can have a common large green area, and which is really attractive, and it really is a lot more productive as far as the use of soil is concerned, because basically that green area can be you know, it can be wetlands, it can be floodplain or whatever that can be used for anything else, but it's just tremendous from the standpoint of green space and open space, but and in conjunction with cluster housing and that sort of thing, you know, it can be a win-win all the way around, but there hasn't been any interest at all in exploring that. at least within that, that particular group. But, you know, hopefully, I think one of the sad things at this point is that more people aren't aware of what's going on. And if they were aware, I think it would be a somewhat different climate. But anyway, I think that's just an opinion. But as far as impact projections are concerned, I think I would hope that maybe this group might feel that they might have an interest in making at least a request for that type of data, because really the planning board, the conservation commission, you know, should have that kind of data. You know, none of Tony's work as basically a city engineer would move forward at all without some plans and some projections to work with. But I really don't want to participate in that discussion a lot more at this point, but I just want to bring it up for your consideration. But then, because of my position on the group, in the MAG group, I prefer not to, you know, be involved in the action if you should decide to take some action.
I know, and it's super tough. I feel like a couple of things. One, we don't know if it's gonna be on the agenda. I keep looking. It hasn't been added yet. The minute it does get added, then we know.
But the projections
Two is, can we review the original document that we had when Jason came over and said we're forming mayor's ad hoc? We need one from conservation, we need one city councilor, we need 2 land. Where was that? Because that was actually laid out. Once it gets approved here,
Right.
we're gonna vote on it, it's gonna go to whatever, A, B, and C. I feel like that order keeps getting changed into whatever's convenient when he talks at the moment. Because there's been times where he's like, yeah, we're gonna vote on it, then it's gonna go to conservation for their feedback, then we're gonna go to planning board for their feedback, and then we'll have council vote on it. Now I feel like it's gonna go to council, then we'll have planning board. Well, wait, now we're gonna back up one more step, we'll let state weigh in on it, but we don't really care because it's already gonna go to council. And now where's conservation? That wasn't even, the last 2 meetings, conservation wasn't even in there, to my knowledge, the way it sounded, that it wasn't even coming to us anymore.
I'll review it, but it's supposed to be from, I do have that information, I
Yeah.
have it typed up, it's a document in an email, I'll hunt it down if I haven't already put it on Google Drive. But it's supposed to go to Conservation and Planning Board for their input before it's approved by council, or
Yeah.
I think presented to council. And then also, I don't know if they've already submitted it to the state, but they need 90 days to review it at the state level.
Yeah.
If there's any changes to.
Not this document, it has not gone to the state. It won't go to the state until after the planning board reviews it.
Okay, so,
Let's see, that maybe.
He did mention something that
There was
he
there was some discussion about going directly
Direct.
to the state and to the planning board simultaneously. But I'm not exactly sure the mechanics would fit, because basically I think the state has to have, you know, can't really do their full 90-day scrutiny without, you know, with something that may be changed after it gets back. So I don't know, I think there's a lot of mechanics there that we don't know about.
I really want to get like Stephanie Gilbert to come in on one of our meetings or something, talk to us and say.
But I
Because
think
representing the state
I
stuff, you
think
can tell her straight out, you know, here we are, the citizens of Auburn, and our own conservation isn't quite on board yet.
one thing I kind of had, so this is from, I think, the December meeting, where there were all these ideas about bringing Stephanie Gilbert in and some other state reps. I'd love to do, like, an open panel kind of presentation with the state, have someone from agriculture, so probably Stephanie Gilbert, maybe have someone from, like, Maine NERPA, the Natural Resource Protection Act, like, that would be DEP, and then, you know, maybe someone from a conservation commission
Or
perspective.
USDA soil and water and stuff.
Or USDA
yeah.
soil and water. I'd like to have basically a 3-person panel where they, you know, present some information, and there's like an open question and answer period, that can be like super specific or generalized, that would be open to the public, just so that everyone kind of has an idea of like, how do these zoning changes impact the resources that are in our city, how does that impact us short-term, long-term, all that kind of stuff. I would hope that it wouldn't be too late to do that this spring or something, in terms of what's going on with the MBGARP, but I would just like to have open access to education where people can come and get their questions answered, and, you know, hopefully it would be before anything is officially changed, but I don't know if there's time for that.
I would love to see us try to do that. And there's something at the senior center, March 12th? March 12th, right?
That's the
From
food
8
access conference.
8 to 12, yeah, and so there's gonna be people from agriculture talking about utilization of land and helping and assisting farmers and resources for them and all that kind of stuff, and growing local and yada yada. There'll be a lot of brainstorming at that. I think it's the 12th, right? March
I
12th.
believe so, yeah.
That sounds
The
familiar.
bottom line is that this is being pushed through at a very rapid rate.
But there's a lot of moving parts throughout the city where this is very relevant, right? We're talking about specifically food. How many of those people are gonna show up? How many people are interested? How many people are interested in changing the
March
ordinance?
7th.
March 7th.
Good Food Council, 8 to 12.
There you go. I'm gonna try to go to that. I think it's on a Thursday.
But actually, you know, there would be an opportunity sometime during the 90-day time frame, when basically you could have a panel like that, and then the people that attended anyway have that information before that, whenever it did go to the council.
I'd like to do it sometime in April, so it depends on when
That would be so timely.
the city of Auburn submits the latest document for that 90-day review. It depends on if they give us time to review the document before they do that, so I need to figure out exactly the timeline for the review of this document. But yeah, I would like to do it sometime in April. Again, have someone from agriculture, have someone from, you know, who's gonna be able to speak more to the natural resource side of things, and then, you know, one more representative, again, maybe Josie from the conservation district.
It would include folks from the university system as well, cooperative extension.
They do a lot.
Really good group. And if we need 90 days for the state to at least review, let's say worst case scenario, and this starts moving forward Monday, which we don't even know yet, but worst case, we're looking at 3 months. So we have 3 months from like Monday, so we're getting towards the end of
March,
February.
April, May, and
So April would be perfect because it hasn't gone through that 90-day cycle yet. It'll be still in, and there'll be these other conferences and talks of agriculture, food, and all those things.
I would ask then, as homework for this group, if you could send me something that you would like to see from this panel, whether it's a question, a topic, or if they could provide a case study that you know of and go over that, basically anything you want to see as a result of this panel, that would help me, just because I want to make sure that we're coming to them with a formal proposal, an idea of what they would be doing here, and have, you know, make them comfortable coming and presenting, not just having it be kind of like a throw all of our questions at them unexpectedly thing. So yeah, just send me your ideas before the next meeting, and I'll see if I can start coming up with
The
like a
two things
roster.
I see, I think we should write down right now, 2 things that we keep talking about is the impact of residential in the agriculture. What would that be? If we want to look at one lot and hypothetically say we build a house here, what are the impacts? And 2 is agriculture, moving forward, agricultural impacts in small parcels. Like, what is their probability of food production for a small lot? What is the probability of their longevity? Is this something that somebody gets this great idea and then 5 years later they're like, yeah, I'm gonna bail, I'm going to school to be a nurse. And now we have this house there.
I. The other part of this is that they're talking about taking this large block of undeveloped land and potentially dividing it into 3 acres and up farms, forests. There are plenty of other parcels in our city where people can do that already. just leaving this area to be.
It doesn't make any sense. None of it makes any sense. Doesn't make any sense for the city of Auburn, you know, economic growth, to get people to live here, to care about the environment. It doesn't.
And I understand the challenges that are faced by the people in the zone who feel trapped and, you know, want to see a change, but that's not what this
But it's so
document
far
is
and
proposing.
few between, we're really talking about like 8 or 12 people at max.
And it feels
No
like what
one's
this
stuck
document
in
is.
that zone,
Yeah.
that's just it.
Yeah.
You're not stuck. You can put a for sale sign on it and
And
go.
sell it, yeah.
Right.
And also, it always seems to be presented that the people who are opposed to the new plan want everything to stay the same, or the way
Thank
it
you
was
very
50
much.
years
But
ago.
that's what I'm trying to
And that's
say,
not the
yeah.
case. It seems almost everybody agrees that there are some reasonable changes that need to be made to.
Like Josie was saying,
To the
incremental
ordinance.
changes,
Yeah.
not all
All
of
in
them.
on
One
it.
small-
Exactly.
Right.
We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
And it's such a large area and it covers so much of Auburn. It's just all over the place. Like,
Yeah.
it's so diverse. Every lot is so diverse. There's
For
just so
me,
much
even
going
if it
on.
is just 80 some odd parcels that, you know, will be impacted, the spread of that has
Well,
significant.
the whole city would be impacted. Well,
Yes.
that whole 40% would be impacted.
Right, but also I'm concerned about habitat fragmentation, like,
Mhm.
in terms of, yeah, okay, maybe, you know, it's not as, we don't know the impact because that hasn't been presented to us, like you're saying, these impact projections. But two, even if it is a smaller number, but it's spread all over the zone, that could have equally significant impacts, and we
Yeah,
just don't know.
that, you know, that's why I really think you really need projections from the standpoint of houses and where they will be located before you can have an intelligent discussion on the wildlife habitat impact, or basically the impact of all these different types of uses.
Yes.
You know, trails and wildlife,
Right.
and basically, you know, if there are houses shotgun all over,
Exactly.
and that will just totally change everything that this committee has an interest in.
Well, I
Clearly,
think
there were unintended consequences of the original
Mhm.
agriculture and resource protection zone ordinance, and we shouldn't do the same thing
Yeah,
again.
with
But
other.
in the opposite direction. Yeah.
So, I think those are a good couple of topics, to start maybe putting together the idea of a panel. Again, we don't have a budget, but if we do need to pay speakers, then that's something I'll have to find out, we can mark as a budget line item, or, you know, something along those lines. So I'll start figuring these out, just send me your ideas, some general stuff, some specific stuff that you would like to see, and we can put together an agenda to hopefully get out. And reach out to.
And then we
some
can
sponsors.
advertise that, the Auburn Liz.
Yeah.
See if we
Does-
can, because we're
does
supposed to
this-
have 2 open public discussions, not public comment on a meeting. We have yet to even have one of
Oh,
those.
public information.
The other thing is they've come up with some brilliant, people have really been collaborating, brilliant alternatives on how to inch forward in changing that ordinance without doing the all or nothing. Such as, oh, well, we can have temporary housing and allow them to establish a farm, and we give them 3 years, and if they haven't established a farm within 3 years or something, then they have to move the temporary home. If they have, then they can build a permanent home. So there's been all these things, and none of that gets up into these meetings, you know? Or instead of, what was it, 1,000, instead it was something like, instead of 50% of your income, why don't we try 20% or even 40 or something, and inch our way in that way? Or leave the acreage as 10 and make an exception here and there, but each exception has to be well thought out. The landowner needs to have all their little bells and whistles and why and all this, and planning would have time, and, or the agricultural committee, so they could strategically review that one parcel at a time and make exceptions, versus looking at the whole thing as, I think that's the biggest problem, is looking at this whole big.
And that's something too, where we can, you know, this hypothetical panel that we want to put together, you know, create some ideas and present that to them and ask, you know, are there other examples of this, is it feasible, and stuff like that, just to kind of get more support and a better idea and have the state kind of working on it. So I like this idea, I really do. I'm gonna get moving on it so that we can get it in before that 90 days.
Kim, before we move on, does this group want to authorize John to somehow convey your feelings or the feelings of the Conservation Commission? Because basically, as a group, you certainly have both a right and will carry a lot more weight than any of us individually.
I mean, I can try again, but I've not received any notice of receipt.
But if we have a hard copy of the fact that you tried,
Yeah, it's not like
That's
we
all we
wanted to
need.
do it. We wanted to.
And we were supposed to be included as, to have somewhat of a voice in this
As a bona
process.
fide
Yeah.
board of the city.
Yes, and this process has been pretty slipshod and undemocratic. I mean, it sounds like on Monday, something's being presented as the product of a group that never voted on it. And, yeah, I mean, we should be able to make our voices heard.
you know, I
Sort of
think
going backwards.
if you're
Totally
interested in
going backwards.
protections or that sort of thing, you know, just say that you know, but if you do make that statement, why provide the rationale why we need the information.
Yeah.
And basically, if we had hard copy, it would be an asset.
Was it a year ago we had a speaker, was it a year ago we had a speaker that came that
Okay.
worked at Wells and Agunquit on the
Yeah.
Conservation Committee?
He was a former professor of mine, yeah.
Yeah, and they were talking about, I mean, this done with the committee, not so much, but you know, what the committee were doing and what, and the resources they got, and they were doing all kinds of stuff. They bought like, I can't remember how many acres of land for the brown-tailed rabbit, and they put bushes out there, so they went,
Cocktails.
I mean, it just blew my mind on what they were doing.
Mhm.
But it seems like in Auburn, we're just kind of like stuck in this, that we
Yeah.
can't, we don't,
I mean,
can't
they've been
support.
around for 30 years, but they did start doing that really early. They had established a land bank that was approved by the city, or the town of Wells, that basically they got this little honey pot that was dedicated to buying land for conservation purposes. And I mean, they're definitely an example to look up to, which is why I had, you know, Professor Grumling come and present so that we could have an idea of what exactly we're capable of doing. I think we're kind of, I mean, we're going on now 4 years old. I think we've, you know, done a great job and really put ourselves out there, which is why I get frustrated when I don't get responses from things that we send on official letterhead, you know, letters of concern. But we are trying, but there's definitely, I wouldn't say resistance, but we're not really being, I feel like, you know, taken seriously when we submit these things.
I feel like there's some cities out there, you can look at them, there's some cities that have just really done a great job with their resources around. I think Bangor is a good example of what they've done. But I just think that in Auburn, it's just like, I don't know, like we're just stuck in this mode, and we don't seem to want to move forward, or there's, you know, we're sliding backwards, we don't want to move forward. But the combination of all. I mean, it's not just a comment, I mean, there's no real answer to it, but it's just frustrating to be in a city that's, you know, democratic, and to have a vote, and to have all these concerns and stuff, and it's just not going.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
not
we all
going
come here
anywhere.
and we put our time in, and, you know, I know this Conservation Commission has made a lot of really great suggestions, and some of the things we've done have been supported. I don't want to give off that impression. But for me, I just, you know, I want to be considered and, you know, have some forethought and have responses when we send stuff. But I think it's just a matter of continuing to throw ourselves in the spotlight, put ourselves on boards where we can, and really just continue to voice our opinion and make sure that we are being heard, you know, when we don't get responses and stuff. I mean, we have had some support, but not.
For my part, I was really excited to be on this board initially. I think there's a lot of opportunity for progressive growth in this city with the regards to agriculture. I think we could be at the forefront of conservation and forestry. I really do, but we're not going to be there with this bit of document that has been created. We're just not. It's
And my hopes is that by getting this panel put together and really making sure, I mean, I'm gonna like force all my family members to come to this thing, is just getting people involved in it, because there's, I mean, even as someone who's a chair of this board, there's so much that goes on that's relevant, but I can't make it to, or I can't prioritize, and there's so much going on that we don't get to see or be part of. So if we can get, you know, the people who this is gonna impact knowledgeable and involved and passionate about it, I think that's gonna make the biggest difference. because we've all done what we can to voice our concerns, which have been, you know, set aside. So it's really just gonna be getting the people, the amount of people that we need to care about this, present themselves. Not that there aren't a lot already, but I think we just need more people.
I think one of the things that's really surprising and rare is that Auburn took a step that was unpopular at the time and basically set aside a major portion of the city for open space. Every other city didn't do that and now wishes they had.
Right.
And but we're in a position of throwing it away and copying the others. And you could ask yourself, which is the success policy and which is the failed one?
Well, thank you everyone for your input on that. I can submit another letter of concern. Maybe I'll print it off and drop it off in person or something, you know. So that, are we all set to move on from that? So they've voiced it.
Yeah.
Thank you again. So that leaves our new business and commissioner comments. So there are 3 of us up for reappointment. Our applications are due by March 4th, 2019. If you want to stay on board, that is myself, Ben, and John. So I think it's just the form that's on the city webpage right now for volunteers.
I would hope that all 3 would be volunteers because basically I feel you're very valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I will be reapplying. And lastly, I had kind of touched on this earlier, I'd really like to, maybe we don't start on it right away, but maybe at least this fall, start creating an idea of a strategic plan to help guide us in what our primary objectives are. Some more loosely defined general objectives, maybe some other SMART goals that we can incorporate in there, establishing things like a communications either plan or work group where we can have proactive communication. We just, you know, pump out fun facts, upcoming events, or, you know, what other relevant information through Liz and their social media pages and get people engaged. And I'd also, one thing that I kind of, it's been on my mind for a little while, but it's been hard to establish. I want to get to a point where we invite at least one person from a different city department or group to each one of our meetings and just start building relationships, because that's going to be huge for us in getting, you know, being taken seriously and being notified ahead of time. And just, you know, it's as much on us as it is on them to establish that communication and relationship. So if we can start regularly inviting people to our meetings just to sit in, or, you know, creating a certain topic where, you know, hey, we're going to talk about parks this time and we can invite Sabrina, or we're going to talk about planning and zoning and invite someone from there.
Which we did basically really at the outset of this commission and had pretty much every single meeting. There would be someone to come in. But we've actually lapsed on that because we got busy on other things. So I think it's very appropriate that we resume that practice.
I think so too. And I'd also, one thing I'm trying to do, so last year we had our guest speaker, Professor Grumbling. I want to do basically one event a year hosted by the Conservation Commission. So this year will be the panel, and then, you know, just some kind of event, like the way the, you know, Forest Board did the workshop last year. I just want to do one event a year where we host something and invite all members of the
And do really well and advertise really well.
Yeah.
But also, when we have the dates group, I would hope we'd have a major turnout, because I think, you know, not only, I think it'll be very informative. And I think really an asset to the Conservation Commission that basically established that link to Bates. And it's my understanding that Bates would have an interest in maybe subsequent additional similar projects in the next year or two.
So I do. One, I don't wanna forget, we have Arbor Day Week that we missed the buck on last year. Force Board does stuff, but did we wanna do anything? And then two was, we talked about, this is the year of the salmon for the anniversary of Auburn, and did conservation wanna do something about that? Because we had brought this up a couple times about doing a river event, or,
Right.
you know, I think conservation should do something.
I think we should too, and I'd love to do a river day. I don't know if it's too late to hop on the bandwagon for the 150th anniversary thing and join
I
that
don't think
in.
it's too late at all.
They're desperate.
And they're looking for
I'd like to do it
ideas.
in like beginning of September, because
Yeah.
that coincides with.
Or August.
I know I personally would be better in September. I just got a lot going on in August, and it's also still field season for work. I mean, it is in September too, but it'd probably be better for me to do September, like early September or something. But yeah, and I think the first year or two they did, they paired it with the art walks that were going on throughout the summer to kind of just build up as much as they could. If we want to do something for Arbor Day, if I'm planning this panel, that's probably gonna, constitute a lot of my time, so I would need someone else to champion the Arbor Day week events and planning that, so if anyone wants to.
I
support,
can
that's
work
fine.
too, and we can talk with Rick on
Yeah.
Thursday and see if we can get some help with Force Board as well. See what
Okay.
they're doing, what we're planning on doing, and what conservation can do in addition. Because I know, again, Arbor Day week is very successful for Force Board, but there's such limited amounts of people. We tried to do something every single day of the week, but you're looking at 4 people, so it's just
Mhm.
double duty all week. And maybe that's where conservation can pick up one day and do something really well, like a good idea. We can all do something, community event or something.
I like that.
We are supposed to be having the Auburn Farmers Market again this year, so, presents at that,
Yeah.
giving out seedlings or whatever
Yeah.
you guys might
Yeah,
have for the Arbor Day offerings. I don't know,
yeah.
but I'll just, as far as I know, we're going to be having the farmers market, so just give me a shout.
On Tuesdays still, you think?
Tuesdays, yep, 4 to 7.
That's a great idea, Kathy.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
We're there yet? Second.
All in favor?
Thank you guys very much for having me come and sit,
Thank you.
and I may even take out papers for conservation. I don't know.
You gonna what?
Happy to have
May
you.
take out papers for conservation.
There is.
And also, don't forget, please, that we are doing our Wednesday evening gatherings. I think tomorrow's gonna be, that's the council last night.
Yeah, because that's city council last time.
Okay, we will call the meeting to order at 6:03. I'll start with roll call. Jordan?
Yeah.
Eric Cousins,
Just Crowley.
Ben Lowe.
Tony Boyer.
Thank you. Do we want to do a quick approval of February minutes?
I motion that we approve February minutes.
But I have some questions from somebody, Need a second.
Second.
Great. So, we reviewed the December minutes. What happened to January? I think it got canceled, but someplace in our documentation said the meeting was canceled in January? Or was it? Because why were we
No,
doing
we had a meeting
December
in
in
January.
January? Oh, then why were we doing December in February?
Because one was typed up and approved and the other one wasn't.
Okay,
More or
all
less.
right, that's good enough. And then, could we get a copy in our documentation as an attachment, Kathy's alternate work that was mentioned here? Kathy Shaw, she created an alternative to the proposed ordinance, but this will be a good place to document a copy by attaching. And there was no notation, I know the city council's talking about the agricultural commission, will we want input? And that would, see, it benefits not coming to a meeting, because then you can't understand what was said. And I didn't know what the least liable way, what that meant. So those are my questions.
So the communication thing, well, so just to fill you in, because you weren't here, is we were gonna form a communications work group, kind of.
Yeah,
And I went over and talked to Liz Allen one-on-one here, because it's hard to do that. And she was willing to post anything that we wanted, it was just gonna be small to start with, on our website, you know, Singapore Sport and Parks. So if it's Auburn related, she has no qualms about that, she would absolutely love to do that. We figured, in discussion, it was a lot of work creating Facebook pages and things like that. Like I run a couple others for other things at work, and it's just exhausting. You've got to be the administrator and manage, and people get kind of belligerent sometimes. You have to manage those comments. So it was a lot of work. Clearly, most of us are swamped with all the other committees we're sitting on. It really is a huge undertaking. Plus, the other thing was we're kind of competing with other people, trying to. You got 500 followers on this page, 200 on that page, 50 on this page, and so it just kind of made more sense to go with Liz. And if we change our mind down the road, it's fine. We're still going to do the kind of the communications work group. We're just not going to have an official page right now. It's just too much work. So the liability was basically dealing with the backlash, possibly making the city look bad if we're not on top of it, and we get people things down. So that's really why
That clears up, because we're gonna keep our communication work group, right?
Yeah.
I thought this was just one small part of what that committee would have done, and not its highest level of work, so now I understand. My only concern, I think it's great to go through the city, because that's where it should be. I don't, not because of Liz, but Liz is one person.
Yeah.
Who's doing this for the entire city, with all people making demands, and having just completed the birthday.
Yeah.
I can assure you that there's small things. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments about February minutes? So all approved with the pending additions and edits?
I wasn't here, and the video is not up.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
I'm sorry, Michelle Miller, I know.
Thank you for coming. Do we want to start with the presentation?
Yeah, I would suggest we take it out of order and go to our most important task today.
Thank you.
Anyway?
So I wanted to go through the presentation that we used at the planning board, because I think all of it's relevant to your discussion. And I think one of the biggest purposes, I think, tonight, you're not asked to make a recommendation tonight. Jordan and I discussed a process where you guys would get a lot of information tonight, you can ask questions, but we would come back at your next meeting. I don't know the date of that meeting, but hopefully it's in April, I think, third Tuesday. So if that's on schedule next month, that works. And we would ask that you provide some recommendations at that meeting rather than at this meeting. So I only have 8 copies of everything. And I have stuff that you guys don't have. So I'll pass a few guys out. I have maybe some people can share. This is just a copy of, actually, there's a
You have plenty, Eric. Yeah. There's 2 more.
This is just a copy of the order that the council voted on to send the draft of the agricultural ordinance changes to both the planning board and the city council. So wanted to share. Yeah, sorry, I said council, not the conservation commission. I know that the planning board is required to have a public hearing. This is worded so you could take it as both boards were expected to have a public hearing. I don't think that was the intent, but if the board wanted to do that as part of their process, then we could plan on doing that at the next meeting with proper notice, just like the planning board would do. So it's up to you guys if you want to have an advertised public input session as part of your deliberation.
We've never hosted a public hearing, to my knowledge. We are going to be having a guest presentation, well, Conservation Commission's kind of hosting it by a Bates group who've been studying the, historical changes in land use in the ag zone, and members of the public will be invited. That's April 8th.
Yep.
So we're hoping that members of the public can provide input and questions in that regard. I guess it would be open to discussion on whether we want to do a public hearing
I don't think it's necessary, but if you wanted to, it's not a problem.
Okay, we do have it in our procedures to do a public hearing versus an information session is different because of the modalities, the notice. I would wonder if we could either do it jointly with the planning board, but then it really can be in the planning board meeting time, which is probably what they have already planned, right?
Yeah, you could certainly join, you could attend the meeting with the
Right.
planning board and provide input as well as listen to all the input that is provided for the public.
I don't know if we have enough information tonight to make the decision, should we or shouldn't we have a public hearing? But I would weigh towards having one where we have the authority, where this is a big issue, where it's likely to be a different night than some of the others. I'm really concerned that residents have not had equal opportunity to.
Okay, I've prepped my delicata squash. Delicata squash is really wonderful because you can eat the skin. It's very, very sweet.
So if we could provide the public another opportunity, which would be documented, so the council would have to listen. But do we have enough time? And particularly since we've never done it, and what date would we pick? And who
Well,
else had
if you
interest?
did it at your meeting on the 16th, we would just need to know pretty much by the end of March.
So then, yeah, if we have time to think about it, let Jordan know.
I would think there would be merit, because basically the April 8th, the base group have been making their presentation, and basically some of their mapping applications might have relevance and actually would stimulate discussion and additional questions. Hopefully the planning board will opt to attend, because that's the day prior to the planning board meeting and public hearing. But then also, if we had, I would basically hold a public hearing on the 16th. By then, we would have the benefit of both the base presentation materials and the planning board public hearing at the same time, so that it would give two independent opportunities for the public to express any views they might have.
That's a good.
Yeah, I kind of concur with that.
So since we haven't had it, if there is agreement, we'll just put it on our normal April. Jordan, if Eric may do it for you, if not, Sue Clements, there's a procedure they have to follow, and I say they, the city, of putting the notice in the paper and all that stuff. You wouldn't be expected to either A, know it, or B, do it. But if we decide tonight, all I guess is you can tell them.
Yeah, if you decide tonight, we have to do a notice for the April 9th planning board meeting, so we really wouldn't add much cost at all to do a notice that covers both public hearings. A single notice that we posted 2 times in the Sun Journal for both meetings.
If we wanted to make that notice for the same one as planning board, when would you have to know by? Still the end of March or sooner?
It would be a few days sooner, so it would be probably the last full week through March.
Okay, well, I think we can probably table our vote on whether or not we want to decide on the public
In the
hearing
event.
until later.
Okay, yeah, if you let me know by the the end of this week, or I guess
Okay.
next week.
I was just gonna say.
Next week, we'll have to send that.
Okay.
So the approach that we used in starting the discussion with the planning board was to lay out these 5 areas. Purpose and function of the ag zone and history. We have a good summary document that you may or may not have seen so far. Chris, I know you already have a copy of this, so I'll send another one, but it's from the initial ag committee. We have a good summary of the history of agricultural protection activities within the zoning district. Secondly, we'll cover the comprehensive plan goals, facts, stats, and map resources. We have a good information hub that we'll go over, show you how to use that. Framework for decision making. There was some frameworks used by previous planning boards that I think have a lot of merit in how they judge their desires for things they wanted to see and also things that they wanted to avoid. and it may be a good framework to use something similar with values that this board identifies to judge the ordinance. And then we can go over the next steps and talk about public hearing and other things that everybody can plan on. This is part of the history. We had, Ed DeGrossier had given me a hand-drawn map that looked like it was copied off of paper towels. Hard to really decipher where everybody was, but it was a map that showed all the roads. And it was, he called it Memories of a Farmer, and it was a farmer that lived down the road from him on Hatch Road, recalling all the farms that he could during his lifetime in Auburn. We don't have a good way to compare that today to say when we're how to compare with the farms now. But it was interesting to see there were a lot of substantial farms at one time doing all kinds of things, from the chick hatchery to a lot of larger poultry farms, pigs, dairy, really varied agricultural activity at that time anyways. And I don't know the exact time frame, but he wrote down his memories in the late 70s or early 80s. So it was probably the previous 50 years of memories.
What is the cutoff year, his cutoff year? After 26.
I think there were 27 total, so I don't have it with me, but it was an additional farm.
Oh, okay.
But I believe there were 27 total.
Well, basically, that list, really included really a very thorough list of the portion of the city, but basically not of South Auburn or the northern part of Auburn.
More around the Hatch Road area and to the west side. It'd be interesting to maybe add to this list based on people's memories for other parts of town.
For example, I didn't notice the Bells, and basically they've been active for several generations.
Yep, that's a big one to miss.
And there were a lot of others in South Auburn at that particular period of time, and well, as you go in North Auburn, those Blondman farms, there was a whole series, so that I'm not casting aspersions, but basically, I think it's a super list of the central part of Auburn.
Yep.
Actually, it sounds like it's just the opposite. It's great support for this. And how might we get the rest? Maybe it's enhanced. Because, Mr. Key, weren't you actively farming back in the 70s?
Some people might call it active, and some might.
Oh, I'm thinking, yeah, these strangers like, didn't he have a farm back then? But you might be helpful to creating that kind of list for that area. I think, no rush, but I love this stuff. I think it's very important.
Another good example is the whole Perkins Ridge area. There were two Wallingford families that, you can add on a lot of names. I'm not really, certain how much time we should spend on that at this point. But
Right.
Other than to recognize that there is a gap there.
I think it's something that maybe if there was interest in Ag Board or Ag Commission, could try to put together some history documents so we don't lose it over time.
And for example, they mentioned the purchase of the Center Creamery, and basically that would have preceded that particular period of time. Because it's been a long time since the Center Creamery was operating.
Okay.
But a super good memory for that.
Yeah, it was hard to capture it anyways, even if it is part of the city. The document that I handed around has a good overview of changes over time, but we went back a little bit further just for a brief discussion. 1919 and 1920, the city adopted their first comprehensive plan. I think we were the first community in the state to have a comprehensive plan at that time. And it was actually interesting the way that they were published, is the entire Lewiston Sun, the newspaper, was Auburn's Auburn's comprehensive plan in 1919. It actually took up a whole.
Really?
We do have copies of that on the information portal that I'll show you in 3 minutes. 50s and 60s, the Blackwell Report really was the start of the idea that controlling growth to the urban areas and trying to limit growth in rural areas, and the creation of the farm and forest zoning district, as it was called, came out of that Blackwell report that's on the ag portal and available for people to review. 1970s, and I think a lot of it was as a compromise. There was pressure for people to be able to do more residential type uses with their land. They started really adding some strips of low density zoning along the ag frontages, as we see along a lot of our rural roads now. 1980s, I think there were a number of extensions. They re-examined change in ag economy, alternatives, decision matrix. I do have a copy of that, the full text that was used in 1984 for that discussion is available on the ag portal. But staff's thought was that this type of a matrix and its front and back, one side is things that you would like to encourage and one side is things that you'd like to avoid. That type of matrix, whether they were the same criteria or not, was a really methodical way for the planning board to look at varied proposals for changing the ag zone and decide which ones were indeed accomplishing the majority of the goals that they had and avoiding the majority of things they wanted to avoid.
This was in the 1960s one?
1984. Yeah, and it looks like at that time we had a proposal from Cleveland and Wallingford and Maxon, so it all names that were either on the council or planning board, I think, at that time. That put forward ideas for ways to improve the ag zone.
I think probably your comments on the target are probably starting roughly the mid-70s. And with development pressure actually leading up to the mid-80s, major challenges and court challenges and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it seemed like a majority of the residential strips were created during that time. There's been some small extensions since then, but not as substantial as were done during that period. I think it was in the 1980s that there was a widespread change approved by the council after the planning board recommended against it. And a group of Auburn residents got together and challenged the council's decision to allow residences essentially throughout the ag zone, and prevailed because it was inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. Moving forward after the 1984 discussions in this decision matrix, 2010 was our comprehensive plan update. There was an update in 95 that also reaffirmed a lot of the land use policies for limiting growth to urban areas and trying to control it in rural areas. The 2010 plan absolutely reaffirmed the idea of restricted growth areas and non-growth areas, mostly in the ag zone, and also some in residential areas that they didn't see that there was room for additional housing to preserve the character, but really reaffirmed the central policy that the city had had since the 60s of limiting growth to the urbanized areas. 2011 through 16, we really started after the 2010 comprehensive plan to try to make some of the zoning changes that were recommended in the plan. One in particular, and you might remember this, I think you were on the council at the time, was a change that would allow somebody with residential frontage to protect their residential frontage with some kind of conservation easement in exchange for being able to build on the backland if for whatever reason they wanted to build on the backland instead.
I couldn't remember the outcome.
Yeah, the outcome was basically that at the time the council voted that they did not want to approve it until there was an ag study. So it took a few years after that to get funding to actually be able to do an ag study. And then when we did obtain funding, that started the 2017 ad hoc steering committee under Mayor Monty. There are copies of the steering committee report. Their primary recommendations were to create an agricultural commission to do further work on the ag zoning district and ag policies in general, but also to find ways to promote agriculture within Auburn, not just regulatory mechanisms, and to look at alternatives to the 50% income standard. Two primary recommendations there. their full report is available on the city's website, and it's also available on the ag portal, and I'll show you in a few minutes. I think we're going to be using that ag portal as the way to put out more information on this. It seems like a really user-friendly method of putting information out. Once you know where it is, then you can access things as they're updated going forward. 2018-19, Mayor's MAGAR committee to address the 50% income and lot size standards. That was really a narrow charge defined by the mayor, and the committee tried to focus their work on that. They worked through a number of meetings, making refinements to a draft, but ultimately not ever voting on the final version of the draft to pass along. The council chose to pass it along to the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. Then I have an email that was shared with the Planning Board that shared with this group from half of the ag committee was concerned that what was put forward didn't really represent what the committee had voted for, because the committee never voted on the final version of it. So it's important background, I think, because make the recommendation.
So it moved forward after vote because it's a mayor's committee, so you can do what you would like.
Well, the council ultimately sent it to the conservation representative by voting.
Right. But it had to be council by the mayor.
The mayor carried out the
Yours hiding in the back, so.
Eric, is it possible to ask a quick question here?
Sure. Yeah, anytime.
So just looking at this timeline, 2017 and 2018, the ad hoc committee, their report and their recommendations that were made. As I understand it, part of their recommendation was to develop a permanent ag commission, council, whatever it's going to be called.
Yep.
And that they were going to be tasking that permanent group with addressing the 50% income and the lot size.
Yes.
Do we know why that didn't happen?
This is a copy of the executive summary from that report that I figured I would pass. This is a copy of the executive summary from that committee's work. I know that the council looked at the recommendations, and at some point the mayor proposed a new committee with a narrow focus, and the council agreed to do that.
So they gave that recommendation that was supposed to be for that specific group, that ag commission, instead
Yes.
gave it to the mayor.
The mayor wanted to re-examine the 50% income and the lot size, and he encouraged the council to form a new committee to do that instead of the commission that was recommended by the previous committee. And that's how we got there.
But did they actually, because I'm sitting in the audience and I'm thinking they were given that recommendation. I thought that the council did not take action to establish this, that this is the mayor's committee. Was there a vote later on that the city council approved or supported or replaced the mayor's committee with one sponsor agreed to by the council?
The council voted to allow the mayor staff support that as a committee.
Okay, so that doesn't mean, right.
It didn't make it possible to create the original commission.
Right.
That's what it delayed it
It delayed it.
significantly.
Yep, it did. And there was a lot of public
And, well,
discussion about that during the
yeah.
process.
Delayed and kind of ignored that, actually, is the recommendations from that committee and from the independent study.
Yep, it didn't carry forward with the formation of that commission right away as the previous committee had recommended.
So
It did continue to work on the 50% income piece, but it didn't form a permanent commission to continue work on the ag issues. Since the 1950s, a fundamental city development policy, as we discussed a little bit, is the orderly growth of central Auburn, conscious concentration of urban and suburban growth and controlled densities backed up and surrounded by mainly farm and forest usage of outlying Auburn. Restricting urban sprawl, and this is directly from the 1950 report. And the city's really been pretty true to that, with some compromises along the way for some residential strips.
Where in the sixties, the planning board in the sixties, basically, you know, there's a lot of language there, but the city's total commitment seemed to be focused on restrict urban sprawl.
Yep.
And that was the one common theme that carried on throughout the eighties into the early seventies until the mid-seventies was the end of another dynamic.
It seemed to me at the beginning anyways, there was probably more, the forest and farm uses were almost just convenient partners in controlling sprawl. That the goal really was to restrict growth in suburban areas to control costs. And farms were able to be a part of that, so they were partners in kind of moving it forward. I don't think that the original intent was strongly focused on promoting farming directly. It was
No, basically, it was a byproduct and basically a means of economically supporting that urban sprawl.
Yeah, the original documents were very heavily focused on controlling costs of services to the comprehensive plan policies, rather than have you try to go through the entire comprehensive plan and pull out all the ones related to ag. We did this for the initial ad hoc committee, and this is just a summary of all the policies that relate to agriculture in the current 2010 comprehensive plan. It did reaffirm this restricted or non-growth areas that are unsuitable or otherwise undesirable for development, where the city desires little or no growth. It said continue to protect rural areas, including North Railroad, Lake Auburn and Taylor Pond watersheds were specifically referenced, and South Auburn, kind of the largest blocks of currently agriculturally zoned land. Continue to allow low-density residential development along some rural roads. For the first time, I think, in our comprehensive plans and in our ordinances, this plan came up with defined criteria so that the planning board and council could use those criteria to judge whether or not it made sense to extend residential road strips along currently ag-zoned land. And it surprised me in the public process a bit when the comprehensive plan committee and the planning board actually used the criteria and recommended a couple of extensions. And when we got in front of the council, there was a lot of public opposition to extending those strips, and the council backed away from those, seeing that most of the people showing up at the meetings were not supportive of it, even when they had the opportunity for financial gain for the extensions themselves. So it was, I was surprised by that, but one of my first exposures to an ag zone change when I was here. Allow flexibility for where and how rural residential development occurs, to minimize its impact on the rural character and agricultural uses. So this piece of it was the zone change that really triggered the ag study, where there's going to be some flexibility in switching your ability to build a house up near the road in exchange for being able to build out back. The comp plan committee and the planning board saw value in it because it kept the rural look of the road frontage by moving the house back in exchange for not building up frontage. Allow new residential development at varying densities on the fringe of the built-up area. This is kind of how the city has expanded most of our zoning over time for both residential and commercial, is to try to grow outward from that center without jumping to a rural area and creating a new residential and commercial center. Consider using density-based requirements. Right now, a lot of our developments are based on frontage, lot width, lot depth requirements, and a lot of communities have gone to more density-based, where it doesn't matter what your lot is shaped like, as long as your average density within a development meets what the community has set for that area. Resource protection open space. So there was, I hadn't seen this in past comprehensive plans, but there was a recognition that a lot of the areas that are ag zone now are not suitable for agriculture or forestry, They include a lot of substantial floodplains and wetlands, high-value wetlands that shouldn't be disturbed and that kind of thing. And there was this idea that we should probably look at the entire ag zone and split out the pieces that were appropriate for ag and forestry and call those maybe the ag resource protection zone or the ag zone, and then have a separate area that is a resource protection zone, purely preventing development, maybe preventing agriculture. Expand access to rivers by creating a riverfront transition designation. This was focused on the New Auburn area, and we've done a lot of that piece of it. Rural residential road strips. As I said, they had come up with criteria and how to base decisions on extending road strips. The intent was to limit the need for new roads by encouraging development along existing roads and use the ag rural zone designation as a means of holding select areas. This has been controversial to some. I think it's served the city well, but it is a controversial use of to hold select areas for future commercial and or industrial development.
Do you know how much we have in that hold for future commercial and industrial?
I could pull it. I could pull the data. I don't know off the top of my head. It's relatively small compared to the remainder of the ag zone, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was 100 to 200 acres, specifically around the Broad Street, Hackett Road area, just outside of New Auburn. Those areas have been intended to become either commercial or residential. Current competent suggests they should be industrial. There's been some discussion about whether or not that's better as residential in the future, but that's geographically it's a logical expansion, but I think it would use up some decent farmland and decent soils, so I think that's probably be a good one for the future ag commission. We also have some areas like Delecto's farm, I believe, is one of those transition areas where he had absolutely no interest in changing the zoning until he's no longer using the land, but the city saw promise and potentially having residential uses someday overlooking the river. The residential strip conditions, we have number 1, 3, and 5 here. These are the ones that fit this discussion best. An established residential pattern, so if you have an ag zone frontage and the house is already scattered along the frontage, they decided that it may make sense to consider having a residential strip to make the homes conforming. Natural resource adjacency, if it was through or near a sensitive environmental area, then maybe it didn't make sense to have a residential strip. And number 5 was the ability to provide public services, and specifically saying that a strip should not be provided along a rural road if residential development will tax the city's ability to provide municipal services. And they specifically considered if the road is dirt or gravel, it's likely that new residents will want it paved, and that would be expensive. The road is poorly maintained, paved road that will need to be improved. It may not deteriorate any faster with more residents there, but there's more people to be upset about its condition. So there's more pressure on the council to improve those roads as you add new residents.
Does the city have, I'm sorry to interrupt, is there a plan for paving those roads over time, or?
Not all of them.
Okay.
Some of them, I don't know that there's any plan to,
Right.
Some of the more rural roads.
Yeah, yeah.
Eventually.
I've been told by the state that the recommendation is to repave every 15 years, and the average road in Auburn is over 50 years.
Yeah.
Over how many?
50.
I've seen it.
I was told that by the state, because they do data on all that.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you know the specifics. Dan Goyette has a pretty detailed capital improvement plan that he thinks would keep the roads in good shape over time, and I think he gets 15 or 20% of the money on average of what it would take to keep the roads in good condition. It's a small percentage.
Part of that is we have over 650 miles of paved road in Auburn, which is, I think, the largest in the state.
Some of our roads were better condition right now than most of the paved
Yeah.
ones, actually.
Center Street's horrible right
River Road or Earth River Road is house, because it doesn't matter what time of day, what time of year, it's really do that.
Well, it was best when it was iced over this winter.
Yes.
It's the
It was-
smoothest I'd ever
yeah.
seen it going up to Mr. Keene's farm. All the potholes were filled. It was
Yes.
nice.
I think that's
The,
the worst.
the current ag zone, this is the objective, to preserve and enhance the agricultural heritage of Auburn, protect the city's natural resources and scenic open space while maintaining the economic value of the land. The district is characterized by a rural, very low density pattern that limits sprawl and minimizes the city's service costs. So this minimized the city's service costs still comes out in the current zoning ordinance. The district maintains the current rural development pattern, allowing for a broad range of agriculture and natural resource related uses while restricting residential development. That's from the current ag zoning. You have copies of the current ag zoning as well. This section is from the comprehensive plan. It suggests that residential uses should continue to be accessory to agricultural developments, commercial agriculture, natural resource-based uses, but it does suggest that we shouldn't limit residences to just traditional farms, but consider expanding them to other uses that are allowed in this other district, like recreational uses or gravel mining operations or sawmills or things like that. I think they all fall into that category. Suggests that the density standard, approximately 10 acres per unit, should be maintained. This is one of the maps that we created, and they're all estimates. There's definitely places where you can find inconsistencies on individual parcels, but we did our best to estimate land cover based on the 2000 and I think there were 12 aerial photos. We have seen some clearing since then, some substantial clearing, more than we've seen in decades, I think. At Mr. Foss's farm in South Auburn, I think he's cleared close to 200 acres, over 100 acres. But that's really only about 1% of the overall ag zone, so I don't think those inconsistencies shouldn't be enough to affect how these maps would be used to make decisions anyways. They're small differences. We've tried to quantify land cover here, where the green areas are forested, dark green areas. Over 70%, I think 74% of the overall ag zone. And I put this on just as an example. I'll show you the ag portal that we have, and there's a number of other maps and pieces of data that are available. These are the numbers that came out of that mapping activity as far as forest cover, crop cover, open space, developed area, gravel pits, recreation areas. We broke this down under ag zone, low density country residential, and rural residential, because low density country residential and rural residential, while the residential zones, you can essentially do all of the things you can do in the ag zone, but you can also live there without being any kind of income standard. So there is an opportunity for people to buy a house and maybe farm part-time in those zones without it being a full-time job. And there's still some land available in those zones. I think what makes the ag zone most attractive to residents is the low prices, but the reason it's price low is because you can't build a residence. So there's, at some point, as we make changes, if it becomes a residential zone, then that low value benefit that people see will no longer exist.
It just becomes bigger or residential.
A larger residential lot.
Which they still can't buy.
Which the
Still
price
can't
would be
afford-
higher
they still
than it
can't
would be
afford to
now.
buy, right?
Yep. That's one of the challenging things with that zoning district, is that is one of the benefits that I think makes it easier to start a farm in Auburn, even if you can't live there, is the lower cost of entry, at least to get started.
Eric, is there a sense of how many farms or how many properties have some type of an agricultural business on it, some type of operation on it, where the farmer is not living on that property? And I know I have one.
Yep, I don't have good numbers, I mean,
How would you know that? How could you
yeah,
find
I don't
it?
think the data exists, I think it would be
It
great.
would tell you the house, right, but it wouldn't tell you who lives in the house if you use that.
Yeah, nobody would need a permit to just start farming. If they had an open field, they could till it, start planting. So we wouldn't know where people are doing that. Whiting Farm would be an example. I don't think there's anybody associated with the farm living on that property anymore.
The gentleman in Martin Meads the other night who said he's got a tree farm out on Steel Road. There's some things that have been stolen, but he doesn't get there.
Tree farm?
Yeah.
I know there's one on the left as you drive in
Did you
Steel.
buy your property?
The guy that bought my property
Yes,
was
that's
there.
what that was,
He doesn't have a tree farm.
or something, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I
It
don't
says
know.
he's harvesting trees,
Well, maybe that's what he said.
so I don't know if he means necessarily a Christmas tree type in.
There is a tree farm on the way in Steel Road on
Yeah.
the left, but I don't know how active it is. Still signs up for it.
If you look at it from a parcel standpoint, there are hundreds of parcels in Auburn which are being used for agriculture, but no one lives on them. You know, it may be an existing farmer which lived down the road, or it may be a farmer in another town or
Yep.
something like that. So there's a
Yeah.
there's a gap there that, you know, is really unmeasured at this point.
Yeah.
But basically, if we talk about a farmer living on his farm, it's an inexact criteria.
Yep. We could, based on these maps, the computer will give us exactly what we tell it to, but it might not answer the question exactly that we're asking. It's, we could show cropland and hayfields, pull all the lots that have those things on them, and then pull out the ones that don't have a residence on them also.
Of course, that wouldn't pull mine in though.
That would, yeah, see, that's the.
It wouldn't be a
so-
perfect.
Well, I mean, and like the second part of my question would have been, is there a way, which we've already answered because we can't even establish that, the answer to the first question. But my second part was gonna be, is there a way that we can find out, or that we can, or that we should know, how many people are farming on their property who want to establish a residence on that property that they previously have not been permitted to do?
Yeah,
I
but they
think
are.
that would be valuable information
It would be.
if we determined, so if you use me as an example, forgetting I have my first property where my house is, and I wanted to live there, and I've established a successful business for 6 years,
Yep,
you know I'm legit, so, you know, anyway, I know this is deeper than what we want to talk about here,
But
but
that question has come up so many times in the last couple of months. I mean, I'm sure everybody around here, familiar faces or rolling horizons. We have brought that question up. How many people want to build and are farming already?
already, right?
Yeah.
That is an important question that I don't understand why we haven't searched the answer if we can't
It's
identify it.
compiling the data. It's literally
Yeah, I think-
having to
Plus
interview
most-
literally every parcel.
Most
But
people
couldn't
in
you
the ag
start?
don't know we're doing
a
this.
survey,
I was
essentially.
gonna say,
Yeah, that
couldn't
was
you
what-
just start either with a postcard kind, the old fashioned where people don't use computers, or a computer survey that goes out to every agricultural landowner that said, do you farm? Do you have a house? Because the piece I just heard tonight, that I was gonna verify, so I'm actually glad you asked. So do I understand things correctly, that rural residential property can do all the things they do in the ag zone?
Almost all.
Almost all.
Not
So-
slaughterhouses.
Okay, so I'd like to identify, because that's a good example, that wouldn't make me. So what I heard was, rural residential can do almost all the things that are happening in agricultural zoning, and they can build a home.
Yep,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
So one of the questions that I would be interested in knowing is, what is the median value of a home in the rural residential versus the median value of a home in agricultural?
That's on, the data is on that website. I've seen that.
Okay, but that's a very important question to both answer and promote. Because between her question, how many people want to do this to start with, we've spent a lot of time. And if we found out that there were 20% of the people who own agricultural land who can't build a house that want to build a house, maybe no action should be taken. If you found out that the median house value of a house in the rural residential, which can do almost everything, is 3 times what the value of the house is there. Again, that goes back to, we're gonna price ourselves out, so why make any changes? Keep the value, because it's got a non-financial value in the city to have such significant agricultural area.
It's
And
tough
maybe we're
because-
chasing something that.
Well, it's
people
tough,
can exercise.
because you're bringing up good points, and I've already dug, I know that information's on there, because I've asked myself that same question, I found it. It is split up by zones, but then I got to thinking, and I was looking at the sprawl map, and you start thinking, like, Palmer Road, Trap Road area, the newer developed areas. Those are all big, brand new, giant homes with like 3 people living in them.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, it's probably bringing the valuation of rural residential up, and it's totally skewing it, when the original, before the developments have occurred in the last 10 years, they were old homes.
Right, but I actually think that's the purpose of rural residential, is to provide the opportunity to build a bigger, better, more expensive house.
Yeah.
Because in seeing Eric and having him do all these presentations, I learned, we don't want to put things out unless we've already got the infrastructure built from the center out. And the other is, and he told me this 7 years ago, the median house value should be $200,000 to just break even.
It's more than 200.
Remember, it was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And costs have gone up. So if you have that information, I'd ask you to share with all of us, but it might be something.
It's right on.
Okay,
that,
all right,
so
just go to the
it's
portal,
on,
I can do that.
Yeah.
I was trying to
Portal
find it
is-
here.
If I happen to find it tomorrow.
No, but I'll go to the portal.
And it's
I can
not
chase
a,
to look, but-
we pulled some examples, and it's not an exact science, because if you had a, say you had a 2-acre house lot in a rural residential zone with the house A on it, and then you had a 2-acre house lot in the ag zone with the same house A on it, your values are probably not going to be
Because the
good.
land values.
Right.
But if you have 100 acres in the rural residential zone with house A, and you have 100 acres in the ag zone, then you would see a much more substantial difference, because the back acreage of the ag zone land would be a much lower value.
Well, it's a place to start.
In some of the examples, I think it was $1,000 or $1,500 average per acre value on the ag zone, only 3,000 or 4,000 residential zone. So it was significant, but those were just specific examples, and the assessor, like, still here both years. You can't average the value across the acreage, and I understand that you can't, but we're trying to just do some comparisons.
Well, you notice I never
It's
use
not
the
the way
word.
that they assess the property.
No, you notice I never use the word average.
Yeah.
Average is a waste of time and effort. It's me, for me.
That's the best we can do on those comparisons, though, because it's not, every acre is not equal in value. It diminishes as the lot gets larger.
It just makes me wonder if there are actually enough people who want to build on their own properties who've proven their ag business that would satisfy the city in terms of growth, but slow. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Would it, if we identified 25 people
Yep,
who are farming on their property,
maybe just
and
not
want to
meeting the
build their home.
50%.
Right now, they're getting that property tax income, into the city from people like me who built their home. I don't need to do that because I already have one,
Yeah,
but I'm using me as an example. If we've identified 25 people, maybe that satisfies what they are shooting for that growth.
and what threshold actually works for that group of actual farmers? Is it, would 25% of their annual income work for them to get on their land, or would it have to be lower? That would be some really interesting information.
I have a quick question. Has the proposed ordinance, has that gone through the city attorneys yet?
They have a draft of it, we don't have feedback yet.
So I'd be very interested, since there
It's
seems to be doesn't it seems as though the 1986 study is directly on point with that. In 1986, they attempted to change Auburn's agricultural zoning, and the Superior Court ruled that it was inconsistent with what was in the comprehensive plan.
Yep.
And so right now, we have a comprehensive plan that seems inconsistent with what's being proposed. So I'd be very interested to hear the legal folks weigh in on this, especially since there seems to be case law on this specific area, which is extremely unusual.
I think I'd be interested too. I think the 1986 language didn't attempt to tie it to some new definition of agriculture. And I think this draft tries to do that. I think the question of whether or not the standards that we have now in the draft are what most people would believe is agriculture. There's a question of it. But it does attempt to tie it to some new measure of what is agriculture.
And you would think that would be enough to justify?
I don't know. I think it's one of those that you go either way.
Right.
They do defer heavily to the towns for making their own decisions.
Yeah, they certainly.
That, I think it, I'm not sure.
Are you gonna, do you know if there will be a ruling on that or a?
We will need a legal
decision
review.
from them?
Yeah, we will need a legal review. I'm not sure if an attorney will give us an opinion on that specific item.
I see.
And I don't know if they did, if it would disadvantage the town to put the opinion out.
Right.
So,
Right.
I don't know what that type of an opinion would be shared. This is the latest data that we have. We will have some soon. By your next meeting, we should have it. This is an attempt to map out the lots that are greater than 10 acres and more than 250 feet of road frontage. We have about 100 of those. Greater than 20 acres and greater than 500 feet. So these are the lots that would be allowed to be split under the standard that's being proposed. 57 of those in addition to the initial 100 smaller ones.
That's total in all zones, right?
That is
The ag zone?
within the ag
But
zone.
what, I don't understand what it says percent ag parcels.
So the
It's
Oh, got
percentage,
it, got it,
of
it's backwards,
agricultural.
got it,
yeah,
sorry.
it's the percentage of land within the zone.
So we have 100 vacant lots that are already over 10 acres with 250 feet of frontage.
Ready to be built on.
That's
Yep.
what,
Ready to be built
that's
on
what
right
this
now that
is.
nobody's building on.
So why are we?
We have all this availability already.
Those are ag zone parcels.
If
Yeah,
you're,
they-
if I ever wants to put a house, the complaint is you can't put a house on the thing unless you meet this other criteria. There are 100 parcels. If somebody really want to do what people are saying people want to do, why are we going any further? We have 100.
Well, in the real world, with today's economic pressures on agriculture, most farmers are happy to have anything for a house, and any available capital is going into their business and not into a new house.
Yep.
And so, your demand is really coming from either the non-forest or the non-agricultural sectors. I would ask this question of Eric, as far as landlocked parcels, exactly the mayor's proposal, can a house order be put on one of those landlocked parcels?
There's no road frontage though.
Only if it has road frontage. I believe.
Or if you own both lots. If
Oh,
if you own one of the other lots, you could give yourself, or I
Yes.
guess if you were good
Yep.
friends with somebody who owned the next door thing, you could say, give me a.
Right away.
A right of way, thank you, yeah.
Possibly on an existing
But
lot.
if there's a right of way, if there's an existing right of way, which most of them already have, if it's an existing right of way to a road, why can't they?
They
Under
might be
man's
able to.
proposal.
If they're over 3 acres and there's an existing parcel with an existing road.
And then wouldn't the city have to approve that right away?
No.
No, because that would be a private right of way, it'd be just like an extra long driveway.
Yeah.
And if you look, when you look at the other stuff on the portal, you'll see this total lot, 782, is lower than other estimates. The reason is that the person doing this mining, I guess, of data has taken out all city-owned, LOCA-owned, utility-owned, like power line parcels. They've taken all that land out, as well as any parcels that are conservation.
I
And so those are viable, most of them are viable options.
They are, I think I'd have to look at the current proposal to see if it would still require some level of road frontage, but if you had a right of way, you may be able to do that on some of the back lots.
And I'm guessing that those landlocked parcels do have a right of way, a deeded right of way.
Probably, and that might be a recommendation that came out of this group, though, is to ensure that any lot has a certain amount of frontage if it did become buildable.
But at the present time, that's not in there.
I am not 100% sure. I think you're right. If it's a grandfathered existing lot that existed prior to 60, I think you could get around the frontage requirement.
So that, each parcel identified unique to only one category, or are not some of these 99s in the, in other places?
The left column.
Right.
The lot would only fall into one column.
Okay, that's what
Yeah,
I thought.
she had told me that she tried to make each one exclusive of the other areas. So 99 landlocked parcels within the ag zone. The next one is parcels with no frontage in the ag zone, possible frontage or on other zones. So that's a lot of the residential strips and things like that.
Because a lot of rural residential properties, basically, there's certain widths right on the road,
Yeah.
which basically is where the house of the buildings reside. And then the backland is all ag, but there's still, as Eric says, road frontage that could, really make those acceptable under the proposal.
A lot of lots and a lot of possibilities.
And are those all being counted, the ones that are partially zoned right now? Because I know we had talked about some that are very large.
Some of the data sets that we had pulled did not include those lots, and there were some sort of anomalies within that zone that actually had multiple thousands of feet of frontage, so they were not included, but they could be used to create additional lots. So I think she has included those. I have the maps, we can double check, but I believe she's included those in that data set.
So that total 782, that's 782
Lots.
unique places.
Right
They're
now.
not doubled up anywhere in these categories.
They're not supposed to be
700
doubled up
each
anywhere
one
in those
is
categories.
absolutely unique, okay.
And that's before they get subdivided, if they end up subdivided.
Bring it.
If we lower the size to
Below the size.
So
As their size now.
I'm sorry?
If you leave them as their size now.
Right, if you
Yeah.
leave them as their size now.
But if you subdivide it,
So
Right, because these are existing.
yeah, right.
this large parcel here that wraps around, it's a couple hundred acres at least, and maybe more like 3 or 4. That one was excluded in some of the early numbers because the frontage is low density country residential. She's included those in what she's doing for the next level of analysis is she'll actually calculate based on existing frontage. We can't start trying to estimate new
Yeah.
roads being built,
Yeah,
but
you can, right.
she'll be able to tell us how many lots can be created in each parcel with 250 feet of frontage and 10 acres.
So when they were looking for a site with the new high school, didn't they also look in the egg zone area, they were looking for any 100-acre site in Auburn?
When we did a site selection, the map that we gave, any 100.
Any 100.
Yeah,
And
and
we
then we
had-
narrowed it down by water and sewer.
And then
Within a certain distance.
but even when it was that, even 100, do you remember how many there were?
I don't.
It wasn't a big number to me, and so my concern is we wanting to subdivide 10 acres, there'll be nothing left to build a forest or farm or.
Well, and then the local food council workshop that a lot of us went to, there is a need to keep large farms too, because we have such a unique thing. We have larger parcels where a lot of cities have subdivided, and now they don't have those large parcels that they need. Portland made a lot of really big mistakes, and that kept coming up, and how they regret dividing up their big plots. And
That's
then
what we're talking about.
with having state agriculture there, talking about the limitations if you do any kind of commercial agriculture. Most of these places require in your business plan that you have to have X amount. It's usually over 100 acres. So there's huge value, they say, in keeping these large large plots, not subdivided ever. So if somebody owns a 100-acre plot they can't use, and they wanna build a home on it and try to do the farming thing if they can, just to build their home, they're gonna maybe look to a new ordinance where it's an opportunity for them to subdivide this 100 acres instead of just selling 100 acres to
That's my
a
concern.
commercial type farming or a large farmer or, you know.
I keep hoping that I don't understand it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, they brought up potatoes, for example, like, some of the contracts they have with like Lay's potato chips and stuff like that, apparently you have to have, what she say, 250 acres, I think, in order
Of
to.
potatoes?
Yeah, 250 acre lot to grow your potatoes on, at minimum, in order to get that contract. So that really severely limits.
But not necessarily on a single lot. You
No,
have
no, it has
You
to
have
be
to have that total
contiguous.
number of planted acres, but not necessarily on a single listed parcel.
But I think if we,
Contiguous though?
Huh?
That
Different.
she was saying is continuous.
Right, that's what I wondered, not a single parcel, but contiguous parcels to total. So you couldn't have 10 acres here, and 10 acres here, and 10 acres here, and 10 acres here, and count.
You could have a few of those, because a lot of that is related to the mechanical aspect. You know, it has to be large enough to accommodate machinery of
Compounds
certain
and stuff like
capability.
that, yeah, to go in.
Yeah, we
Keep it
visited Bell
efficient.
the other day, and they have, Lewiston,
Right,
Auburn
right.
farms, and they were pointing out the proximity to the river is a big thing for them.
Yeah.
The fact that they're able to suck water out of the river and irrigate with that, because otherwise they said if they had to pay to, pump water out of wells
Would be
and
too
stuff, it would
expensive.
just be too expensive for them, so, because they use a ton of water
Yeah.
apparently, so.
if you were trying to figure out the number of farmers that are not living on their land too, I just thought, as you mentioned, Bell's,
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of farms like Bell's, and actually probably your farm, where you were cultivating land that somebody else had a house on. So there may be a homeowner with a large acreage and somebody else is cultivating a piece of their land. And I don't think there'd be any good way to select those out.
Well, like the smoking population needs some of their farms, like the big one that's out towards the Lisbon area, they don't live there. They're cultivating that land out
Yeah.
there.
But
again,
there's a
it's
house
Lisbon,
on
not Auburn, right. So, there's possibilities there too.
The Rosemary and GIS has created this agricultural resource protection zone hub. It's kind of a trial, but people have responded pretty favorably to it. So I think we're going to use it for this
It's
project.
awesome.
It's good, it's a major
Yeah, it
asset.
is.
Good. I think we'll use it for other things, but right now, the trial is this. Anyways, we'll continuously add data to this. If you've ever used the city's WebGIS, you can go to the City of Auburn website. Under Quick Links, here, you can choose Map Auburn. When you click on that, it'll bring you to this page that I have open. Click on this Map Auburn icon. It will bring you to this page. Here in the search bar, if you do search Ag Hub, AG Hub, and there's an Ag Zone map for Hub. Ag Zone, here, maps and documents, sorry. If you click on this application here that Rosemary has created, and we can continuously add things. So one of the things that a lot of distinguishing differences here, but the top one, the green loop with the leaves at the bottom is the previous mayor's ag commission. The blue loop, which I don't see a lot of difference in at this level, the leaves at the top, is the current ag arm. So anything you see with those icons as you go through the site. Study maps, zoning study all layers app. This has all of the data from the initial committee in a format that you can zoom and zoom out, search by property address if you want to zoom in somewhere. You can look at residential permits. Those new residential permits show up as dots on this map. lot of different information, zoning, land cover, aerial imagery, soils, current use taxation. This shows the people that are currently participating in some of the state tax programs by highlighting the parcels depending on which program they're in.
One thing I wanted to see on there, maybe if you see Rosemary, is maybe getting the watershed overlay. So we have the ag zone and you can actually see the layer of where the watersheds are all around.
I'm surprised we don't have that.
I didn't see
But
it
we
in
really
there.
should.
I kind of looked, although I didn't have a ton of time, so maybe it is, but
I don't see it on that list.
yeah, it would be nice, just because I was looking at where the soils were in the ag zone and then where the watershed, and of course, we're talking about Lake Auburn.
Yep.
It's just kind of really important when we're starting to look at some of these properties and how develop or not develop.
But I think that approach is really a constructive approach, and basically, you know, if there are other major topics, you know, whether it be water-related problems or whether it be something else, it might be industrial, it might be business and that sort of thing, if you create, you know, utilize that pattern, but basically gather together all of the information on a relevant topic at a given point in time, it really, you know, it combines the visual impact as well as the description of various options and that sort of thing.
We can layer those at will during the discussion if people.
Yeah, because we were also talking with Bates and stuff, is getting a CAD program, sort of, where you can actually layer all these in the ag zone. So you have your watershed area, your soil, way over the ag zone, and then you pretend that you're going to open up this area and develop it. And you can put the impact of residential, let's say a few people are fertilizing their lawn, a few people have livestock, a few people are using manure in their crops. And you can almost look at how that's going to impact the watershed even. We talk about phosphorus, nitrogen leaching in there. CAD programs are pretty awesome. You can put weather patterns in there and all kinds of stuff. We've done it, emergency planning.
Yep.
If you have a
We could do that in
accidental
GIS
chemical.
too. The data layers are there.
Yeah, and that would be something that, you know, before you anticipate, play around with stuff and see how that impacts.
There's a lot of modeling that can be done.
And all the base, you know, maps are already in there.
So that,
She's done a lot of work.
whether we're talking egg zone or city as a whole, I'd always go to the other system in assessing those cards.
Yep.
Can you map this so you can pick 3-bedroom homes in the ag zone? 3 bedrooms, 1 bath.
You're looking
Tiz
to
is
move
looking to
up.
buy it.
No, I'm getting older every day. Well, that was, I'm right,
So
to city, but
you can.
You
You
can.
can use the assessment data. I can use some basic stuff for something that's specific.
but you use the assessment data, not this, because I've tried, I must
I
be
use
in front of
both,
me. Okay,
because
because I was
there's-
gonna say, I've tried on the other, and I can go like piece by piece and look, but I can't solve it.
I would export something from this and export something from assessment information.
Okay.
I think also, a little, if we have time this evening, basically when Chris reports on the base capstone project and you'll see the results on April 8th, you'll see how those maps are going to complement what Rosemary's created.
So the April 8th, have we got that little promotion piece that we can start basically looking?
No, Liz is working on it. She said she'll get it to me as soon as she can.
Excuse me?
Liz is working on it. She'll get it to me as soon as she can.
Okay, that's,
Or, I think Monday or, yeah, Monday or Friday.
because we're coming down to 2 weeks out, and if we want the residents to come, we cannot wait till this. AMC.
So my last piece tonight is to give a paper copy of the ordinance. I don't know if you emailed the drafts out to the committee.
Yeah,
So
That's why I
you've seen
said-
them, but here's a paper copy. I really think oddly enough, using paper is the best way to preserve forest land.
I know, I probably, oh, that one's in color. What's this one, another one?
That's the ag district itself. First one was the definition changes.
Was there an extra one down there, Kathy?
Definitions, yep.
Really, the most significant change, in my opinion, is the definition of farm here and all of the changes there.
This is just the definition.
Yeah, you should have two.
So you have a copy of the definition changes. Starting on page 1, about halfway down, the definition of a farm. Extending on to page 2, really the 4 or 5 criteria rather. There's a numbering error in the 5 criteria, 1, 2, 3, 3, and 4, so it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is the most significant change in the whole ordinance.
Is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Replacing that, using that to replace the 50% interest rate. The other portion of the ordinance attempts to sort of slow the development by not allowing subdivisions, not allowing splits in the first 5 years, really just opening up the lots that existed as of last year for development in the first 5 years. It also opens up the possibility of developing lots that are smaller than 10 acres if they exist, although there's not a huge number of those that are not. Cemeteries already developed, or utility parcels, as we pull those out, there's not a huge number of those 3 to 10 acre lots.
So it's like creating a new residential with controlled growth. Slowed growth.
The $1,000 in sales of either forestry or ag products. And I don't know, Kathy, maybe you know this on an IRS format. I know in the city tax programs you can take into account food that's produced for yourself or donated. I don't know if you can do that on an IRS format.
No, so donations, yes.
Donations.
I don't even know if you can do that this year, because
Okay.
I haven't seen the new forms yet. So I don't know about that.
But $1,000 sales doesn't, on that form, I assume, doesn't really take into account what you had to spend to obtain whatever you sold either. So it's possible to buy something and sell it for more or less than what you paid for it to generate $1,000 in sales. I know in the tax programs, you can take into account firewood that you've harvested for yourself. $1,000, I would think, 4-cord of wood at $250 a piece would be equivalent to $1,000.
And basically, the proposal, unless it's been changed, basically was $1,000 investment is not $1,000 of sales.
Could be either or. So each one of those is an independent criteria. So if you harvested $1,000 worth of firewood and you invested $1,000 in a couple of chainsaws, or planted $1,000 worth of trees.
Or like the example that I use, if someone buys $1,000 worth of compost remains, sprinkles it on their lawn, now they can build a house.
If they claim that as an agricultural investment, yep, and they also sold
Pretty lawn
something.
and nice big McMansion. 'Cause you-
Well, these are all hypothetical questions until we know what the planning board may or may not recommend. So possibly Eric can bring us up at some point and update us on exactly what the planning board is.
Well, I think we'll hear more from the planning board. The planning board really wanted to receive all the information and come up with a game plan for public input and for how to move forward and get the information we need to make decisions at future meetings, which I think is a lot of what Jordan and I had talked about for you guys to do here. Tonight you get a bunch of information. On the 8th, we'll hear from the Bates students. Hopefully you guys can send a formal invite from this committee to planning board and council. It sounds like you'll do that. So hopefully some of them will attend. On the 9th, we'll have another planning board meeting. And we expect to have, we don't have confirmation yet, but the request has been made. Department of Ag Conservation and Forestry. I think we'll have somebody from their ag program and somebody from the forestry program at the planning board meeting on the 9th. We've asked Maine Farmland Trust, they volunteered to do it, we just don't know if that night works, or whoever they intended to send, and Abercrombie Land Trust. So there's going to be a number of meetings coming
Fire,
up.
police, and public services too.
That's right.
The
fire, police, and public services as well, as that expert.
I was so glad that was brought up.
At least that.
We'll be able to have somebody from each of those.
Did you see everybody's glazed eyes?
I saw, yeah.
I
Watch
also have a
this
representative
meeting.
or two coming from the Soil and Water Conservation District for that planning board meeting.
Yeah, the planning board didn't specifically ask for them, but I would encourage people to invite whoever they think may be a useful part of the discussion. There will be public input as part of that meeting as well. The Soil and Water Conservation District certainly can be valuable part of that.
Eric was responsible for making those requests or invitations to those experts and all these people.
So the planning board specifically asked for Department of Ag Conservation,
Right.
Farmland Trust, and ALT, as well as police and fire. I didn't ask public services, but we can get them there as well, because they're internal.
And they have requested for police and fire already?
No, I don't think we have, but we'll be able to get somebody from those internal departments there. I think that was it. I'd have to double check the minutes and the notes you were making that we asked.
Is the planning board meeting live stream like council meeting?
It is now, yeah,
Okay.
on the YouTube channel, not on the Great Falls TV, because it's at the same time as the most of the council meetings. It's actually much better quality video than you can create on Great Falls TV.
Eric, how much focus has been put on the future? Basically, there are good measures, you're putting together good measures basically of the history and of what has occurred, what changes have occurred, and what things are occurred. But almost every question that I hear relates either to the past or to what exists today. But planning is supposed to incorporate what is likely to occur in the future. We've already, we've got a good measure and recognized a lot of changes have occurred since '60 and the current. But how much emphasis has been put on providing measures of what may occur in the next 3 or 4 decades, and how are we going to prepare for it?
There was a real attempt to try to talk about that and understand it in the initial ag committee's work with Ken Meter, who's done a lot of that work. I would encourage you to look at their reports are here on the ag portal. We haven't talked a lot about that in the most recent process. You've been there for a lot of it, but
Basically, any of the prior 12 years of planning board that I was familiar with, basically, we're constantly looking ahead to how can we, what do we need to do today, what's likely to occur 10 to 15 years from now. But I haven't heard that type of discussion or question or data coming forth in the current discussion. It seems to me that's a missing component that really need to incorporate in seriously. Because if you look at the UN recommendations or whatever, by population 2050, it's going to be a whole different world.
then they may not be able to grow food in a lot of the places that they have historically.
But I haven't heard that other than in the Conservation Commission internal discussion. I just haven't noted that type of discussion or at all, or questions from folks.
Almost feels like they don't feel the need to discuss what agriculture looks like 25 years from now, because they won't have that ag land left. So if they're planning for it not to be there, I guess they don't even feel like they don't need to discuss it.
That basically, just brought up earlier in the question that, at the ag global meeting, basically, there was discussion as to the mistakes that Portland and other coastal communities made, but we had, but I haven't heard that type of discussion and challenge here locally, and it seems to me that is very important as a part of looking at the whole picture.
Yep. Yeah, I think there is information in the earlier ad hoc committee's report
Yeah.
around that. I would encourage you guys to look at that and think about that as part of your recommendations.
Wish we knew how many people we're talking about, because based on just these kind of numbers, we're really doing a lot of work, effort, risk, and change for, we don't know how many.
I
How
can
many
tell you
people?
at the Ag Arc meetings and what we've seen at the city council meetings, there's only been maybe 4, maybe. And all they really have been concerned with is their own self-interest. They don't care about the ag zone at large. They just want to put
Yeah.
something on there.
I've never heard a single one of them talk outside their direct lot.
And for people that are doing some kind of agriculture, but not the 50%, is that, and they'd like to put a house on
Some of them
it.
are not even doing agriculture.
No, right.
They're just looking for the opportunity to build a home
Yeah.
on their property.
Or inexpensive,
Yeah.
exactly.
If anybody has any ideas of how we can quantify the numbers, because the reverse side of this is if we go to the extreme, every piece of egg property is divided into 3-acre lots and sold off for what you're not directly using, because you can probably generate more revenue for selling it off of lots going away. Are we getting
There
a
any
second one?
any information available or in the process of being assembled as to the capital cost impact of road improvement, which would be required under the proposal was forwarded to the mayor?
Nothing specific to road improvements. I think, I'm not sure if we could do that easily or not. We can, I don't know if Dan's capital plan is a model in any way in GIS or it's a list of roads and their conditions. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how we would do that. I'm sure it can be done.
But, I'm assuming that there's a standard cost of building a road or whatever. That is
There's,
a fairly,
depending on type, but yes, there are costs per foot.
Did we ever get those numbers? I have that question I can ask.
I have those numbers. Do you have?
How much does it cost per square foot?
Per square foot, so like a full depth reconstruction would be around $5
A running foot,
a square.
$85 a square foot?
and what about the average width?
But that's for like in town with, you know, drainage, curbing and sidewalks. More rural, like a reclamation project, is around 55 per square foot.
per square foot or per running foot of road?
Square foot, because
Really?
you don't know how wide
Yeah.
they vary.
So not linear feet.
You can convert it to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
depending on your width.
Yeah.
Rural, you said was 55?
55 for a reclamation project, so that's when you pulverize the existing road and rebuild it. Which is like what we truck road.
Twice,
Yeah.
twice.
Well, in my time once.
So, in the road situation itself, there'd be no new roads under this proposed plan, just having to upgrade roads that currently exist for the new use. Is that
I'm
right?
sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
Will this zoning change result in the need for some new City of Auburn roads versus there are currently City of Auburn roads that will need to be upgraded, we use the linear plane, and upgraded to meet the needs and uses? I think those are two separate things. I'm hoping there's none in category 1.
It would be possible to build a new road for a single lot, but not, I mean, if you can't create lots for almost 25 years, I don't expect it to work. That's something that the financial.
So if the proposal is enacted as it is currently proposed, there would be no rules.
If you can only, no splits for the first 5 years though, would make it unlikely to see any new roads in the first 5 years.
I can show you some on the maps.
That you think people would build out as new roads?
It's because, you know, again, sitting there and watching people and you say, well, you won't be city roads, they can be private roads. But I've had the opportunity to sit there and vote on private roads becoming city roads because everybody in the
There's
street's
some
getting
out,
old.
that's right, there's
And
some
we
out
can't
by
afford
Taylor
that.
Pond, weren't they, did they finally agree
There's a
to
lot of private
adopt
roads.
a couple private roads right in those cities? So it means the city's now taking on responsibility.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that, there's no problem with having private roads. It's really a huge benefit to the city to have private roads if they stick to their policy of not making them public. So when they don't stick to the policy.
But if there is an existing road on paper, a street or road,
Like a paper street or older. Yeah, well, that, it would be possible. I just would be surprised if you can't create a subdivision to sell off multiple lots if it would be cost effective to build.
right, but basically, if you didn't, anyway, I
The
don't
two of
want.
you guys should talk after, is
Yeah.
what I think.
I don't want to take any more.
I want Tony to be there for the cost too.
But, yeah, you know, I think in the maps that I've seen, there are situations where that would occur.
Somebody might be willing to do that.
How do water and sewer play into any of these kind of changes? You know, you looked earlier when we talked about trying to find 100 acres that had water and sewer access. So if we subdivide, if we get down to these 3 acres, $1,000, 2 chainsaws and 6 trees, what is going to be the impact on? Will they have to have water and sewer? Or
They won't. They won't have to, and most of the action is not served by
Right,
sewer. 'Cause
right.
that's, originally, a lot of the boundaries were drawn based on where sewer could
Right.
be achieved practically. But, no, 3 acres you can easily do something. You can go down to slightly less than half an acre. and so it's easily.
Because public health best interest or environmental reasons, but
It doesn't leave
legally
much
we can
room
do
for a
it.
replacement system.
Well, really, I think the real focus as far as conservation commission, that basically is really almost wait until we see the outcome of the April 9th planning board meeting. And then that window between that meeting, when we would have obtained the direction that the planning board is going to go.
Gives us
And
7 days.
that week, but basically, you know, we can prepare for our CC meeting.
I think we should still be reviewing that.
But I think, you know, anything specific prior to that time is premature.
Yeah,
How long do we have?
we've only got 7 days.
No.
Planning
My
board.
question is going back to how long do we have before we're expected?
60 days.
60 days. So if we
So
work,
starting today, let's
right,
say.
if we work that back, then we would not necessarily have to have our public hearing at the April.
Correct.
And as much as it's nice to save some money, I actually wouldn't want the 2 public hearings in the same ad, put them all in to negotiate a price, because that means our notice is gonna be way too early. We're gonna need our 2 times closer to it, so maybe we can even hold off the final decision of having a public hearing, or picking the date, but I think we should not have it at our next meeting if we get 60 days. Whether we set up a separate date for a public hearing or we do it.
Well, I also, this is kind of off topic, but I'd like to throw out, because we do have a lot of moving parts, this committee, aside from Ag Zone, if we want to have another meeting, but we'd have to discuss that, just so that we can get some of our in motion other projects that are coming up too. So-
Exactly. Okay, what was the date that it went to the planning board and CC in 160 days?
The date of that order, I think I handed out all the orders.
Oh, you did.
Well, and then that's when I contacted Sue because I hadn't received the final version of the draft until you emailed me on
Last
last
Thursday.
Thursday, I
Yep.
think. So would that be the start of our 60 days?
I think it
I
would
think
be,
today
So
should,
they're saying February 25th, but if we didn't even get one until Thursday was the 14th, we've lost 2 weeks.
yeah,
So
this is the
again,
first chance you
I
guys
would
could have.
push back. Again, I think a note needs to go to the council since it's their action and say, we're pleased to be part of this, but our 60 days doesn't start till either A, the day you got it, or B, I think they're trying to find a couple more days here, or B, tonight when we all got it. But it is completely unfair to cut 2 weeks out of a 60-day period.
Pull it.
Right.
Yeah, I think it says 60 days or 2 meetings, not in this
Oh.
order, but in the previous one.
In the
previous
memo from the
process.
website.
I'm gonna suggest that you have, if you want a public hearing, that you
Yeah.
have it in April, and you try to provide a recommendation at that meeting, but you guys can choose to do what you want, and I'll make it work.
Thank you. Thank you. Great program.
Thank you.
This was a great job. You could take your round every day.
Eric's like, you know how much information I've learned? Write a book.
Yeah, this has been, I think this discussion, and Roland Miller, the former economic community development director, always told me that I would be going through this about once every 10 years, and so far he's been right. Is the most challenging public policy discussion that we have in this city. And it's the most challenging one that I've been involved with, that's for sure.
Now, before major changes were to the ordinance too, it was actually done quite a bit, it seems like, where they were taking one plot per se, going to planning board with whatever, can we make an exception to this? And then it was adopted where, like you say, some of them have been changed to rural residential or had.
Yeah, and most of them have been an extension from some
Yeah.
other zone, though. They haven't hopped across the large ags and, put them in the most northern or southern tip.
And do you feel that so far that's worked?
I think it's allowed us to grow in a fairly controlled way, and also to make sure that there is land available for commercial and industrial uses along the way to grow our tax base. I think it's worked pretty well. I think a lot of communities have been envious of our ability to do that. I don't think it's been done perfectly. I think the airport area was some of the better ag soils that we had, and that's industrial now. That's unfortunate, but it's also right next to the turnpike exit, and for a lot of other reasons, it made sense to use that area in that way. And there's a lot of tax dollars that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for some of those decisions.
Mayor, can you give us an update on the Ag Advisory Committee that supposedly the mayor and the council are developing? Because I think that's an important, potentially important component.
It wasn't on this last agenda. I kind of expected that it would be. The city manager and city clerk had drafted a proposal for that. It's been to a couple of workshops at the council, I think. I'm not sure when it'll get scheduled, or if they'll wait until after there's some kind of a recommendation on the ordinance. I would keep an eye on the council agendas. We'll know soon what's on the April 1st agenda, so we'll be able to see if that's going to be on there. I haven't been directly involved in that very much at all.
I feel like they're waiting for that committee once again.
Why do we need it after?
Until we make a change.
Why do
This
they
is
need
the
it
same
after,
thing
after they make
last year.
stupid changes? They don't need that committee after they make stupid changes. I mean, the only hope we have if they make these changes is that the comprehensive plan comes in a year from now. It says, no, we're changing it back. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's also, maybe there's a possibility that at some point
It's
everyone
the
throws in the
one
towel and says,
consistent
let's just
piece
table this
that goes-
until the comprehensive
Yeah,
plan.
way back, way back. It's just the one consistent thing that has always come back. We need to have this before.
Well, it's been swept under the rug for sure, for absolute sure. That recommendation from the ad hoc committee has been absolutely, completely, 100%
But basically,
disrespected in my opinion.
everything goes back really to city council and Auburn policy, because as Eric pointed out initially, the comprehensive plan, everything up to this point, has been restrict urban sprawl. And And so basically, either that needs to be reaffirmed, or it's got to be changed.
Or, yes, or expand urban sprawl.
You know,
Basically, that's what, yeah.
the proposal that the mayor made is basically expand urban sprawl, which is directly opposite from the policy in the comprehensive plan. But, you know, it's up to the council to determine whether they want to make that change or not.
And they're asking for feedback from you and from the planning board in order to make those decisions.
Have we not wrote them two official letters that were totally ignored?
Yes.
Making recommendations?
So,
doing
that's where I was gonna go tonight, because I had talked to the mayor this afternoon, he said, I've answered them twice, you guys keep saying that you haven't done it. So the first thing I did was go to our minutes, and I don't see any request, any statement from us that says he didn't respond. He said he did, and I said, well, send it to all of us, there's all these forms. So when I went and looked, and it's not in our minutes, that he didn't reply with courtesy, you know, and we know we've sent 2 letters, there's something wrong. So I wrote back and said, I've checked the minutes, there's no notation that the mayor hasn't responded. However, if you said you sent something, which he told me, would you please resend it and have somebody track it, because he hasn't sent it. I went back, and the only email I have from the mayor related to conservation it was an August date that said, could you call me, because I didn't send conservation help. And if you remember, he came to our meeting and sort of announced it. That was that week.
That was way
That's
back,
the
that was like
only,
August.
only email I personally also had from the mayor related to
So
conservation.
it's in our Gmail account, the auburn.me.conservation@gmail.com, which is why I created that, so we can track everything, and it can be adopted by the next year and the next year. So when we sent out that first letter on December 13th, I think we got a response 2 or 3 weeks later, no, just from the mayor this one time, 2 or 3 weeks later, basically stating, you know, thanks for the input. You do have a member on this MAGARP to voice opinions for you. Nothing's been proposed yet. You'll have a chance to look at something before anything's voted on. And then January 22nd, I had submitted another letter, similar.
Approved, because we
That
actually
we had
did that.
approved, yep. And Josie from the Soil Water Conservation District, who was at the January meeting, she also submitted a letter. Holly sent a response to her, but we never got anything
not to us.
that time from the mayor, and we didn't get anything from any members of city council on either
And all
account.
she said was, thank you, we'll be reviewing this at.
Yes, but yeah, so the one time I got a response from the mayor in regards to the December 13th letter, which is in our email. The second time, nothing, and from him, and then either time, nothing from anyone from city council.
I didn't realize I was supposed to go there, because I was still.
Right.
So, but again, we talked about the last time what we did, it was, maybe it could be a public voice.
Send that out again, the Gmail thing, when we send it.
I will. I've been having issues in terms of you can use the account login information, and it's not supposed to have a 2-step verification to it, but it still tries to send a code to my phone, which is like 15 minutes that I would have to like email it to somebody. So if everyone wants to bring in like something next time, or like try and log on from your computer, just let me know ahead of time. I can send you the verification code. I don't know why it's doing that. It's not supposed to, but we can figure a way
The other
around
thing is
it.
Google or Star Google, all their Gmail accounts and the Google whatever is going obsolete as of, I think, April 1st. Some of them have already been taken out. So some of unrelated to the city committees, but other committees that I sit on, we've been using Google Docs and Google Gmails and stuff, and a lot of it is now getting pulled over, so everybody's kind of been in a panic on trying to create new emails.
I haven't heard anything about that, but the reason why we did create Gmail is because we were denied a city email. And I didn't want, and we had a period of time where we had 3 different chairs in 2 years, and
Yeah.
there was no way of tracking down information. I couldn't find any of our old, ordinance changes or policies
Yeah.
or stuff. So, I mean, I haven't gotten any kind of email notification from Google saying that our account's in jeopardy or anything, but I'll
So it's
keep an
probably
eye
not
out for
that
it.
Gmail, Google Star. or something.
Yeah, we
It's
don't
a
have
different
Google Star,
version.
but yeah, but I can check, make sure it's all up to date, and I can try and get all of your devices approved.
If anybody's using Gmail and has Google email, by the way, double check, it's not on I guess they're just closing it. They said that they couldn't keep up. Google responded saying they could not keep up with the new software and virus programs, and they felt that they weren't doing the public a justice because they couldn't invest in keeping that.
Well, I'll keep an eye on it, make sure we're not in jeopardy, but in regards to, you know, the stuff that we've already sent in, you know, we've tried and haven't received anything, so hopefully this more
So,
formal process.
I have a question, Laura, yeah, just to clarify that. So, Conservation Committee sent recommendations
Yes.
about this ag thing.
Yes, we have provided feedback there. We left them letters of concern, basically stating what we felt was lacking from the conversation and, you know, just basic feedback, nothing super specific.
And ad hoc committee submitted recommendations. The ad hoc committee, the
Oh, members
recommendations
of,
initially.
yes, that
So,
email
but
letter.
all of us, ad hoc committee, conservation committee,
Prior to this committee doing their work.
all of these recommendations have been ignored, swept under the rug. Basically because they lack support for expansion in urban areas. Correct?
Possibly.
For us, for me, I support of our position,
Yeah.
but, excuse me, I don't
I mean,
understand.
it just seems like the only time that they're gonna say yay, you know, is when everybody says, let's build, baby.
But why isn't, I guess I'm having a very difficult time understanding, so I'll go to your place and we can write a different letter to the three people I elect, you know, my board and the two at large, to say, number one, why can't we have the courtesy of a reply? And so thank you very much for looking into it, so this acknowledgement. And two, what's the problem? Like, is that the problem? Is the problem that they don't want to say, yeah, we really want development?
Well, let's call it what it is. Let's call it what it is. They just need to be honest about it.
Right.
We'll fight it, obviously, but, I mean, it's,
Well, my fear is the lack of response that we've received. We haven't had any, you know, response communication. When on February 25th, the original agenda for the City Council Conservation Commission was left off when they were, you know, putting on the list who to send it to. It was Planning Board and the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry from the state. So I had email in saying,
After we sent it.
please add us to the agenda, and then after the February 25th, I never heard. So I had to contact the city clerk, and then she forwarded my concern to you, and then you promptly sent me the information last
And
week.
we had
And so
talked
how
about being
how
on
can
this
be
agenda
addressed?
previously.
All of these things that really are just keep pointing to, I don't know what the terminology is, but I'm going to use the terminology. Process violations. I mean, there was no vote about the recommendations that the mayor's ag group or the city council. You know, you guys, this group was left off, as you just said. I mean, those are protocol,
From the get-go.
somebody help me with the word here.
plan.
Protocol, not voids, those are protocol.
Yeah, from the very beginning, when he
There's
created
some,
that.
there's some legal issues going on here. There's no ethics committee that's in any sort of real operation.
It only happens
What
when
kind of
there's a
recourse does
complaint.
anybody have?
So if the, just sort of a clarification, so the ethics committee, people are looking for like a standing, regular meeting kind of group. It is, somebody has to file an ethics complaint in order for it to spring to action. Unlike, say, our group that we meet every
Because
month.
there is no ethics committee right now, they just put a second member on, but there's supposed to be 5, so they don't have a
There's nobody to
quorum.
So they don't
They
have a
get a
quorum, so
complaint.
that's their excuse out.
There's nobody to give the complaint to is the issue. So what is our recourse in terms of going up the ladder or stalling something? I mean, we're just getting walked over and kicked.
I don't know if legal has any say, but if they're looking at that right now, is it possible to let legal know that ahead of them, policies have, or the protocol that was agreed upon has not been followed, and there's been concern?
That there was a protocol agreed upon was not, and I agree that there have been issues with policy, but I'm not sure that there's a legal argument that there's a protocol that hasn't been
Well,
followed.
we've all said, even you have said that there was no vote
Right,
of
yeah.
the mayor's
Yeah.
ag group that agreed to put those recommendations of the mayor in front of the city council,
Right.
in front of the
Yeah.
planning board. that was a violation of protocol.
I know.
Why wasn't that not kicked back to them?
I know that I don't disagree with you, I know that the original paperwork that created that committee says that the recommendations from planning board and this group go back to the committee. So, we'll have to see how that plays out.
So the MAGARP committee supposedly still around.
Gets it back.
Well, it
Has no
says,
question.
it says that you guys will see the recommendations of the Conservation Commission and the planning board. Prior to going back to.
To answer your question, a lot of that is not in ordinance, you're talking procedures or policies. The city council, if they violate even their own policies and procedures, they're the ones that decide reprimand, restitution, whatever. There's no outside oversight, and again, my reason for knowing that, while I served, saw that kind of behavior, and contacted, in fact, maybe just before I served, in contact with like state people, Attorney General, there was somebody back in, and the answer was they govern themselves.
Sweet.
So if it's not in ordinance, you know, they're theirs, and that limits what citizens can do. The biggest thing citizens have, in my opinion, one is their voice, and we're not hearing consistently from enough people this single faces, and two, you change the people in the position.
Yeah.
And, you know, people say that all the time. In fact, there was a post today, and I thought, you know, the majority of the people on the city council and school committee ran unopposed. They couldn't get somebody to run for the vacant seat of the school committee from last month to November.
Ward 4 is
But
always
speaking
very
to-
difficult.
Speaking to your number
Always
one
difficult.
of letting people know, I've said this, some people are getting tired of hearing me say this because I've said it several times now. For those who haven't heard it, I would put money on the fact that there are maybe 15 to 20% of the people in the ag zone who own property or residence and/or in the ag zone who are directly affected by this, whether they want development or not, that even know
Yeah.
this is happening.
Wow.
What about the
I
other
believe it.
80
I
to
agree.
85%?
I
And how do we
agree.
reach them? That's not my individual responsibility
No.
to go knocking on doors or to send flyers, but you know what? I'll buy stamps and I'll stuff envelopes. That should be the city's responsibility.
I
to
can't
let
agree
them
with
know.
you more, but we have no communication policy in the city of Auburn. We have no policy that says, how are we going to communicate information with our residents, with the people paying the bill? There is none. It has been suggested more than once, I'm as vocal as I can be, and there is none. And again, until enough people do something, why, you know, the other side is, why should it change? They can give a fifth one.
Sorry, I'm sorry for.
No, I'm happy,
You know,
I'm happy to know there's
upset about
another
it.
person.
It's,
And as far as our role goes, by ordinance, the Conservation Commission only does advocacy, advisory, and education.
Right.
So we have no real
Authority.
authority.
and that's why I say I'm sorry to be spewing that here, guys.
No,
I
no, we
understand.
support
It's
you.
a
But we
harm.
want to
It's a
help,
harm.
support,
Right.
and educate, because that is part of.
Right, absolutely.
One of the things that we're working on, that planning board hasn't specifically asked for yet, is we are getting an updated mailing list with current assessment data for all people that own parcel, property in the ag zone, whether it's a piece of their property or all their property. There's about, I think, 11 or 1,200. We'll be getting the list back soon. We can eliminate duplicates, so we're not sending 30 notices to the outer water district and things like that. I think there's going to be 700 or 800, but if this committee wanted to make that one of the recommendations, that's fine. And, you know, you guys telling us that we really need to do an outreach to all ag property owners might be something that you can all get behind at this meeting, that we can.
And then we capture, for those who have email addresses, to help control future costs. And for those who don't have email addresses, and they say that, how are we going to communicate with those people? We're talking this one. Because, again, we don't know how many people who live in the ag zone have access to the internet. You can say, oh, well, everybody's access to the internet, to the library.
I have two people who've offered to sit and stuff envelopes and like stamps, or field stamps, whatever they have. And, you know, I mean, I think that there are people, you know,
No, real people.
who are willing to,
Yeah.
right, who are willing to attempt to help the city to do that due diligence. But it's hard, and Eric and I have talked about that mailing list, and I certainly appreciate his efforts in getting that going and supplying that. We desperately need it more than I.
Well,
Yeah, we do.
And that's the thing, is this meeting on the 8th, I missed last month, sounds like an important and great meeting. It's under 2 weeks. Under 2 weeks, and we don't have a committed date.
And I would,
And again, that's not please let me hear, I'm not complaining about this, Alan, I'm complaining about our lack of communication policy and the ability to do something. If we could have something, we would do that same thing. We'd take charge in the sense of our own group of friends and notify them in whatever forms we want. But, we, this commission, can't go out as a commission and do something. We can as individual residents, because you can't control. But, again, the meeting is the 8th, the other meeting's the 9th. The notice should tell us to come, the community to come to both. And tomorrow is the
And we need
20th.
sufficient time to notify the public, so
I don't know if I dare to send out 700 notices
You know,
about a
these are
meeting in
all-
this room either, just in case.
Well, that's,
that, just saying.
well, you know what, then we should be having these
It's quite a statement.
conversations
It's quite a statement,
in
though.
our places, yeah.
But look how
I-
we were trying to merge the cities. There were all of these meetings going on all over the city, different times, different days. They were always publicized, Sun Journal,
But remember, that was
Board
not the
and-
city of Auburn doing it, those were those various groups.
yeah, that
They
was that
did that.
commission that was working on that.
Right,
that was
the commission and the individual community. The city of Auburn did not do that.
Yeah.
But, these are all valid concerns, but I think what you just brought up is we've got 2 weeks roughly, and then we have between the planning board, next planning board meeting, and our meeting, basically there's roughly a week. So really, I think, I'm not trying to discourage this, but I think in that limited amount of time, what we directly can be responsible for is what occurs in the next 3 weeks roughly.
Oh, I agree with you. I
And so
think the
basically, I
difficulty is
think
that
we
no
really
one
need to,
knows.
I really need to focus all our energy and our attention then, and then we can start, in the future, we can reflect back on what we've done wrong and how can we fix that.
No, I agree. I'm concerned we're gonna have a meeting on April 8th, and the people present and the people that are gonna be present, and that's it. And it's a lost resource for the meeting for education.
That could be, and I recognize, respect all of the conflicts in time too, but at the same time, we purposely, I think, John and I were communication, basically picked the 8th so that it would be prior to the planning board meeting, so that hopefully one of, as many members of the planning board as possible can take advantage of that. If they don't, that's their choice.
Oh, I thought there was a good day. That, again, my concern is, and I know everybody, but I was gonna ask Jordan later, because all I know of the meeting, having missed it, was what was in the minutes, which didn't tell me. I know I'm gonna take whatever information she gives me and create something that I can send to my Auburn friends and say, show them.
I know, and it's hard because our videos were really posted.
They're not on, yeah.
Like, not a single one has been posted since September. This is really, I probably nailed that one right into the, I've said it 1,000 times, I don't know what the issue is, because normally they would be up within a couple of days.
Water district, I think.
And every other committee has all their videos up there. All of a sudden, when we started talking about this agricultural stuff in September, when Jason came and asked, I'm gonna create this mayor's ad hoc, all of a sudden, none of our videos are up there. And I don't know if it's coincidence or I'm just saying, trying to find a coincidence, but we have asked numerous times, right, to get these videos. And I know that every meeting I've been in, even all the strategic planning, people in the city, I've said, hey, why are our videos not up? Why are
Oh, there's the one that's conveniently cut short as well.
yeah.
Are you willing to use the council chambers? Because that's where it's easy to record
Yeah,
meetings.
we absolutely can. And sometimes there's meetings in there
A lot
at
of
the same
times,
time,
yeah.
so that's what we're struggling with.
No,
And we're such a small group, we don't mind, we used to be right here in the middle.
We just need to.
Your
I
next meeting, though,
appreciate-
it's
I
a
appreciate
topic
it.
you may want to.
No, I appreciate everything you get, and I don't want to hold him any longer than that, because it's been a long day.
Right.
We do know the schedule for the next 4 meetings related to this topic, so.
You do? Can you share that with us? Because remember, the public doesn't know anything about the council agenda until 2 business days. So Thursday by 4:30, we typically get the agenda.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the, this committee's meetings with Maine students on
Right.
the 8th.
Yeah.
The planning board on the 9th.
Yeah,
Your meeting on the 16th.
yeah.
And then
Oh, I
the
thought-
second Tuesday in May will be the 14th.
But
So,
when is the, when is the council though set some dates?
I don't
Nothing
think they
related to this?
have, no, I think they're waiting for this process to work through.
And then
We
the
could-
state also had 90 days minimum.
They do. And I haven't heard a
Is
thing.
it 90 days started, or does it?
It started.
It started, yeah, the week, I think, that, I think it was a week after the council, that following week, started the 90 days of the state. So if we, I think that we need to do a mail to all property owners at some point. If you guys wanted to recommend that we do that sooner than later, so we can advertise this whole schedule of events. That's certainly something you could do, and we could work with the mayor's office to.
How soon do you think you're gonna have that list of 11, 1200?
Hopefully by the end of the week, and it'll take a day, or maybe a little longer to narrow the duplicates.
So if we had that recommendation and had that all
Yeah.
typed up, the minute we get the actual list, we could start.
If you
Yeah,
had
we
it
can
to us
provide
by
that
next week,
recommendation.
we could do a notice in that amount of time.
And it would be a nice problem to have 700 people show up. We won't, but it'd be a nice problem.
We might have to schedule a
Or
second
at least
year.
just have 700 people respond.
Right.
And
I
then
take
we should
70.
see if we can maybe hopefully get one our April 8th meeting, like he says, over there. And then our
Well,
conservation meeting. over
the
there.
April 8th can't be over there. Well, I had requested it because there was nothing on council, but I guess there was a proposed budget meeting or something. It wasn't on the,
Every week, yeah.
it wasn't on the calendar yet, but I was told that that room was not available, so this was the next biggest one. But maybe the 16th. I'll work with Tony on getting that.
So on the 8th, we can't have that wrong.
But we'll
That's
record
the
it
one
in
right
here.
here.
Well,
We'll record it in here.
Well, actually, this room basically, did really held a lot of people when they had the Jordan Mill, Bates made the Jordan Mill presentation. We had a large attendance. So this room can be arranged to handle a lot.
I think it'll probably be best to do rows of seating than to have
Right.
tables like this. Because when we did the Littlefield Dam one a couple of years ago, it was in tables like this. But there were a lot of people kind of like standing on the edge, so I think rows of seating might be best.
yes.
Is that the one, the biggest presentation that happened with, okay, so they spoke from that corner of the room, and we had people, because I remember being over here, and again, the seating arrangement wasn't good enough for the here, so here, so.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think 65 of the tables, so we could probably get 80 or 90.
Yeah.
With just chairs and then tables. So do you guys want to make any recommendations tonight, or is that something you would forward later?
I think we can probably forward it by the end of the week.
Okay, yeah, if there's any of that stuff that you want to do, just.
But
send
do
it
you
to
can
me, so-
expect something for that, right?
Okay.
For the mailing
For the
list?
mail.
Yes.
Yeah. What, we can't tell you till the end of the week. Jordan, it's good.
All right.
That we will, he said that, I think, yes.
Yeah, whether or not you want your next meeting to be on the TV. Do you need this computer or not for the rest of your work?
I think we should be all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
I don't know, you've been putting in a lot of long hours.
Yes.
It's been a lot of 3 and 4 night meeting nights, weeks lately.
Very good, your daughter,
Please
she changes.
ask Chris for the dates update, or he has to leave.
Yeah, I apologize, my daughter's at dance, I've got to go pick her up.
Yeah, but
An update on the Bates capstone.
Yeah, so the Bates students are concluding their work. Eric and his team have been working with them closely, and thank you very much for all the resources you've been providing them. They are doing both GIS data, so they're generating maps to show the difference between the type of agricultural use that was happening in the ag zone back in the 80s versus today, so you'll be able to view that. And they're also looking at other communities that have faced similar pressures around the United States and how they've dealt with them. So they're looking at Unity, Maine, and Vermont, and Wisconsin, and Los Angeles. Believe it or not, there are communities all around the U.S. that have dealt with development in different ways and encouraged farming in innovative ways. So they've come up with some different case studies that they're going to evaluate and provide to us. And I have not seen any of the data yet, so I can't give any insight into it or anything. And we've, Maurice and myself and Bill, who've been dealing with them, have tried to stay out of their wheelhouse so that we don't influence them in any way. So we will be as interested and spellbound as I'm sure you guys will be when they present. So I think it'll be quite interesting. That's pretty much all I have.
And they've been doing a lot of good work.
Yeah, they have been. It's been very interesting what they're pulling together.
And there was the field trip.
Yes, oh yes, we went and spent an interesting day the other day. We went to Michelle's place and saw some compassionate composting, and we went to Bell Farms, and we saw the largest pile of potatoes I've ever seen in my life. I was absolutely amazed. We wanted to jump in the potatoes, but Dave Bell said there was no jumping and climbing his pile of potatoes. But he has a fascinating building which is custom built for housing and storing potatoes all winter long, and we're at the end of the winter now, so the building is almost empty of potatoes. But it was very interesting hearing his tales about the agricultural zone and the challenges that Bell Farms deals with. We visited Kathy Shaw's farm and saw quite a few animals and.
Just a tiny portion, really.
Yeah, I was going to say it was mud season, so we didn't get to see everything, but it was quite interesting. The Bates students were quite interested in everything, especially your operation. And
Great questions.
yeah, and they asked a lot of good questions, and I think it gave them a chance to get their feet on the ground. And I was saying to Michelle earlier that it was such an amazing afternoon for somebody who's lived in the ag zone for like 20 years. I've never gone and visited farms like this, and it might be something that would be worth replicating in the future for people. I was even thinking for the mayor and stuff and other folks that have been participating in this, but haven't had a chance to actually put boots on the ground yet and see these places. Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating thing. I mean, I live right near Bell Farms. Like, you know, I could probably throw a rock and almost make it to Bell Farms. And I've never been in there and wandered around and seen all the different mechanisms. I mean, they have automatic sorting and bagging and all sorts of crazy stuff. So it's definitely something that I think would be interesting for this committee to evaluate as something that you do periodically. You know, something maybe you do every spring or every fall as a way of educating people about this area. Because the one thing that we've come to realize being part of the MAGARP committee is that there just isn't a lot of discussion and conversation between farmers and stuff. So people don't know a lot of the stuff that happens out there.
And then for the non-farmers, they know exponentially less and care exponentially less.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, it would seem like a wise thing to do to anybody anyone whose job it is or whatever, as part of a committee, to make changes to an ag zone or any zone for that matter. They must be required to go visit some of these places. You know, I don't know how you maintain that. I don't know how you do that, but they don't know. They simply don't know.
Well, in a world where people want to know where their food is coming from, and this
It would
is
be
so
a popular
Auburn.
tour. I really think we could get a lot of people to come.
It's wrapped in plastic in a grocery store.
Yeah, we drive them all around. And
We have some photos, and we'll put together a little overview for you so you can see. We didn't document it as rigorously as we probably should have. We didn't realize that it was going to be this valuable. It was sort of an impromptu thing, and then it became.
I can send you some photos.
Yeah, if you have some good
Without
photos.
stuff
Yours is one of the
covering it.
places I didn't take photos at, ironically. I was asking questions.
So there is a Maine Farm Day. Remember, I'm the city brook here, but
Yeah,
I
there you
love
go.
these events. There is a Maine Farm Day, the farms all over the state of
Coming right
Maine
up.
do an opening, and that's Maple Sunday Day.
I just saw something,
Maybe-
Farm days is usually, I think, in June.
Yeah,
or
that-
July.
it had to be nicer, but-
maybe it was just.
But we haven't had farmers in Auburn
Right.
do this, and I don't want to put anybody in the spot, but I can think of 2 reasons why they would. But could be addressed if it became a city-sponsored. One has to do with insurance.
Right.
Think about how many people she wants on her property,
Right.
on Main Farm Day.
Wandering
and take
around.
out the liability.
Yeah.
But if it was a part of the city of Auburn's community events and activities,
Mhm.
that liability issue would shift, shared, whatever. So that is one, which I think is the strongest. And then the second is, again, we'll go all the way back to the first thing, which is that Auburn is supposed to be promoting farming and farm products, and we don't. And we don't. And if somebody says, well, we do, then I'm gonna ask them the how, the communication. So, but, again, the risk manager in me says, great idea, but if I own the farm, I have great concern. Now, one-on-one, to answer her question, the requirement to go to places is, I think, excellent. It needs to be in the job description for the committee. So if you're gonna serve on conservation, in addition to the meetings, we should have an expectation that you will visit, you know, X, in order to maintain it. And I think it's Parks and Recreation that has that kind of requirement in their list. They have to participate in 2 events or volunteer. So you know up front when you're volunteering for the committee what your work is. So that might be a way to approach that. I love the idea. I'd go to farms any day. I'd love tours.
After you guys left up that day, I was thinking about having an Auburn Ag Day, where everybody in the ag zone that wants to could open their farms, or at least just showcase in some way.
Side of your road.
It might be easier to attract people on a day that's not a statewide event too, where you're competing with other towns.
I don't think it would take much to organize, I'd be glad to.
But like she said, it would be good to have sort of that sponsorship if we were.
August 22nd. I don't know what the weekend is, but it's 6 months since our birthday, and our birthday was in the winter. So let's celebrate Auburn's birthday at our farms.
Thank you,
That's
Brittany.
good, thank you guys, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you guys are doing on this. Look forward to the recommendations.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
There's a whole bunch of different main farm days.
Adjourn, or what would you do?
June,
What
July,
time do you finish your work?
August, the deaf.
I don't think there's anything more, I'd say that's super urgent, other than I am meeting with Phil Crowell and some other members in Parks and Rec and Parks Subcommittee about membership issues, who's kind of, how does this communication work, and refiguring out the Parks Subcommittee situation, and that's on Thursday. Other than that, I think I and Jana were reappointed.
Yes, you were. Congratulations.
Ben will be leaving us in June. We're sad to see you go, but understand, and hopefully we can maybe have a meeting at your
I know,
Q
that's
spot.
what I was thinking too, we could hold one there.
So we never replaced,
Shelley, I asked her
Shelley.
at that council meeting, she's like,
so
absolutely.
we will now have 2 vacancies that we.
An announcement just
Unless
came
there
today.
Kathy
Came today.
applied, right?
I'm hoping to find the time to stop at City Hall on Friday.
Oh.
It's online.
And I also spoke with a customer of mine at the shop who is, his wife actually was just appointed to the planning board. And I think he's interested in becoming a member of the conservation.
Down those 2 right there.
And do we, because I like Mr. Keen's idea, just ask them to also appoint 2 alternates? They're not, quite frankly, we can realize the ordinance hasn't been voted out.
Well, we really need to authorize us to change the structure a little bit.
Remember, you told us to
Well-
act like we had. I thought that was a good idea.
But before we close, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to, we authorize John to name a CC work group if she feels it appropriate, because basically, if we give her the authorization, I don't think, I suspect our agenda will be filled after the next planning board meeting. And in preparation for a CC meeting, which would be a week later, if there are some priorities that have been expressed previously here in the Conservation Commission that basically ought to be addressed with developing a draft proposal or proposals, whatever. Basically, that work group would have the authorization. I mean, Jordan, if Jordan feels there are issues that ought to be addressed, then basically she can name a work group that basically would prepare proposals for CC to consider at the next meeting.
Does that work for you, George? What we're trying to do is give you resources, so you don't have to do it all yourself. Sure.
Should
So-
be free help, why would I pass that up right now?
So I would second that motion, that we provide that resource to Jordan, that she can manage however she
No,
like. That
she
we all
can-
stand ready to help you just. give us a second.
She can use her judgment at that
Yep.
time, because we really won't know what the issues or what the playing field is going to be until after the playing board meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. And with that,
I think one of them would be people should start drafting a proposal like this, because there are several different options out there. Kathy has one, the mayor has one, the planning board may come up with another one, which would be a compromise.
And the planning board is
And,
very
then basically, if we've got a scorecard that we can measure them with, basically it'll be objective and I think has a lot of merit. And I suspect if you draft it appropriately, it can probably further the objectives of the Conservation Commission.
That's a great idea. If you do that homework.
okay. All right, I will motion to adjourn.
Second.
Perfect, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for coming.
Sure. Yeah.
So Michelle, when you walked in, I was gonna ask you this, that, Eugenia's sister? Yeah. Oh, there's no question you really, when you walked
Just a
sat
little.
down, when you sat down, and then I thought I heard you laugh,